My Hero Academia is my favorite story. I love the world of superheroes, and I love the characters. But the show has, as of recording, just recently ended. The 8th and final season has closed. In some ways, I'm happy. I like knowing how it ends. I like the fact that it didn't extend its ending, that it had one central narrative, and once that concluded, so did the show. In other ways, I'm sad. There will be no more waking up to an episode on a Saturday morning, and as much as I like knowing how it ends, there's something exhilarating about being stuck in the middle of a story, wondering what comes next. Knowing, after Season 7 ended, that the story was soon coming to a close, and looking to understand the story more fully, I decided to rewatch all episodes a little bit more intentionally and create a tier list of all My Hero Academia episodes and record my thoughts. All 170 episodes plus 5 OVA episodes ranked and positioned within F, D, C, B, A, or S. It's my most ambitious video yet, so buckle up and let's rock. Episode 1, Izuku Midoriya, Origin, starts us off solid, landing squarely in B tier. It emphasizes that Izuku is, having been born in a world of superpowers or quirks, quirkless. He is lesser than his classmates. We learn of Izuku's past, his obsessive fandom of the number one hero, All Might, and his unyielding desire to attend a top-notch hero school called UA and become a hero. Having been journaling notes on fighting and quirks, anything that might help him reach his dream. He's attacked by a slime monster and saved by All Might, and, excited beyond belief, manages to ask All Might the question that's been nagging him for years. Can he, being quirkless, become a hero? Episode 2, What It Takes to Be a Hero, stands as the first S tier. Izuku is told by All Might, the man he looks up to more than anyone, that he cannot become a hero without a quirk. Izuku is heartbroken, but consoles himself. It's what he already knew, isn't it? As he wanders in his thoughts, he finds that he's at a crime scene. He subconsciously was drawn to it as he always was, still looking to learn how to be a hero. When he realizes that the slime monster is back on the streets because of him, that the heroes on the scene are unable to restrain the monster, that All Might is weakening and won't be able to step in here, and sees the victim as his friend Bakugo, though his friend is also a bit of a bully, he leaps in to save him. His heroic instinct inspires All Might to push himself beyond his limits to action again. After being scolded by the heroes, he walks home, satisfied. Even if he can't become a hero, at least he was able to help today. The episode closes on All Might rushing in, saying that Izuku can become a hero, because he has a unique quirk, one that can be transferred, and he has now chosen his successor. It's imperfect, but iconic and moving. So, while I hesitated with its ranking after watching it, I couldn't put it anywhere else. It is, undeniably, S tier. Episode 3, Roaring Muscles, B tier. Izuku, who'd spent his entire life training mentally, is physically trained by All Might, preparing his body to receive One for All Might's quirk, in part by cleaning up a trash-covered beach. All Might transfers his quirk to Izuku by having Izuku eat one of his hairs, and Izuku rushes to UA to complete the entrance examination. This episode is somewhat cheesy, and the beach is a little bit hard to believe, though it is a convenient training ground. It is still a good episode. Episode 4, Start Line, A tier. Aspiring UA students are tested in a simulated robot crisis. Points are awarded according to the number and level of robots defeated, with one certain type of robot being worth 0 points. Simply a threat to be avoided. Izuku starts late, immediately behind the rest from the get-go. Still at 0 points when the 0-point robot, giant and immediately intimidating, is released. He turns to flee but sees Ochako, a friendly girl he met earlier, trapped beneath a rock. He decides that even if he can't get any points, he can at least save her, and uses his power for the first time leaping up to and defeating the robot in a single punch. But this first use of his power broke every bone in his legs and in the arm he punched with. He falls back down and is saved from the fall by Ochako's gravity-altering power. He returns home, again satisfied to have been able to save Ochako, but knowing he'd been the wrong choice for All Might. Time passes, and Izuku gets a letter from Yue, a video letter regarding his acceptance. He watches it, surprised both that All Might is a mentor at UA for the next year, and that he was accepted due to the points given in a hidden category, given for his heroic action at no personal gain, saving Ochako. It's a good episode that's held back due to the secret objective that, while it makes sense for people to be admitted for a heroic nature, feels a little too convenient, and for its use of clips we've already seen in flashbacks presented multiple times. I just don't need flashbacks of what happened 2 episodes ago, and their addition distracts from and taints the overall story. Episode 5. What I Can Do for Now. A tier. Class 1A, Izuku and his classmates are challenged to physical examination with, for the first time in their lives, quirk use permitted. The lowest scorer is under threat of expulsion. Izuku hesitates to use his quirk after the physical damage it caused earlier, but after being confronted by Eraserhead, their teacher, expressly stating that he must use his quirk and the physical consequences or be expelled, Izuku hurls the ball, using his quirk only in his finger to launch the ball. No students in the end are expelled, though we learn Eraserhead is fully willing to expel students. The episode is great, but the repeated overlays are getting old, and the intensity of Eraserhead's attitude is a bit much, especially when you're used to how he acts throughout most of the rest of the show outside of this episode. Episode 6. Rage, you damn nerd. Landing in C tier. In this episode, we watch the students in their first hero training class. The students are paired in 2v2 matchups, with one team acting as heroes, the other as villains. Izuku and Ochako are pitted against Tenya and Bakugo. Bakugo's anger at Izuku, both for he believes lying and hiding his quirk through all the years and for getting in the way of his goal to become the undisputed #1 hero. This episode is fine, but there's a lot of school building, world building about the school, and Bakugo is overplayed and a little obnoxious. The best moment comes when Izuku and Bakugo clash near the end, and Izuku's quick wit and relentless study of heroes, even Bakugo's, fighting styles. Episode 7. Deku vs. Kachan. C tier. Izuku and Bakugo's fight continues. Through flashbacks we learn of their childhood and their quasi-friendship from youth. Izuku cleverly positions his team to win at his physical expense. Again, Bakugo throughout much of the early seasons is so over the top that it's annoying, and too much backstory is jammed into the middle of fight sequences, but it has some really cool moments too. Episode 8. Bakugo's Start Line. D tier. We see the other students as they too compete in the 2v2 training. We're introduced to the other characters more completely, learn of All Might's philosophy on the symbol of peace, and we learn a little bit more about Bakugo that makes his character and ego more understandable. It's not bad at all, but there's not anything that stands out. Episode 9. Yeah, just do your best, Ida. D tier. Shortly after the class votes on a class representative, won by Tenya Ida, chaos erupts throughout the school when the media burst past the UA barrier, which protects the students inside. Tenya displays his leadership. The students then head to training and are met by villains, calling themselves the League of Villains. This episode is fine. The media is obnoxious, Tenya is a little goofy, but I kind of enjoy his odd personality. All Might's quickly deteriorating strength is well set up, and the primary antagonist is introduced. Tsuyu's statement about Izuku's quirk, followed by the quote, "I say what I see," was a little bit off-putting and felt forced, but overall, still a fine episode. Episode 10. Encounter with the Unknown. A tier. Eraserhead rushes at the enemy and displays his incredible skill. The students, however, are split throughout the training facility by a villain with the ability to teleport others around. The students fight back to protect themselves. This episode is great. The battles are fantastic and the teachers' heroic natures are clear. Looking at it with a critical eye, I can see the author's hand in splitting up the students in a way that creates a perfect strategy. Combining Izuku and Minoru and Tsuyu's quirks creates a perfect counterattack. However, it is also within the field of possibility, and is a clever solution that, even if somewhat convenient, isn't immediately obvious. Episode 11. Game Over. C tier. The students and instructor fight as Tenya escapes the training center and rushes to bring help. Eraserhead and 13 are, after giving their all, beat down by the League of Villain higher-ups, who are on a whole different level than the grunts. On the brink of defeat, All Might arrives. One thing that I appreciated most about this episode was that, as strong as the students are, they are clearly and obviously on a different level than the experienced adults. I almost ranked this episode higher, however, in the end, nothing really stood out. Still a fantastic episode. Episode 12, All Might. A tier. All Might leaps into battle, but the villains seem unfazed. They plotted this situation just for this purpose, to defeat All Might. They have a plan. But the students themselves rush in to save All Might, and are able to draw enough strength from the villains to get All Might out of the trap. All Might then tells the students to step back and unleashes on the Nomu, a strange beast that seems to have multiple quirks. I'm somewhat left questioning by why All Might could only succeed after the students save him, but still really enjoyed this episode. Episode 13. In Each of Our Hearts. B tier. Other pro-heroes arrive, and the League of Villains retreat into hiding to plan their next move. The school deals with the aftermath of the attack. Rewatching this after knowing what comes later, I noticed for the first time that Yuga proclaimed he was absent from the fight, foreshadowing that I completely missed before knowing the payoff. It's a solid closing to the first season. Season 1 is a solid opening. Its reliance on flashbacks is excessive, and it's a little anime-y at times in its opening episodes. It's still good, but I personally don't really like the extreme over-the-top pervert trope that a lot of animes use. The characters are good, though early Bakugo is over-the-top. Overall, though, I like the world it sets up and the characters within the world. Episode 14. That's the idea, Ochako. A tier. After the crisis, school kicks back into gear, especially with the UA Festival, a chance for students to display their talents to the world, coming up right around the corner. All Might talks to Izuku about his desire to have him burst onto the public scene, make the first step to becoming the next symbol of peace. This episode is mostly recap and setup, but it's also funny and lighthearted in a way that I quite enjoy. Episode 15. Roaring Sports Festival. C tier. Shoto confronts Izuku. Then, the wait is over. The UA Festival begins. The first event, a no-quirk barred race around the school. The setup in this episode is excessive, and anime perverts still irritate me when forced into the story, and I just feel like most of this episode could have been skipped, and nothing really would have been lost. Episode 16. In Their Own Quirky Ways. B tier. The race is on, and after All Might's idea for Izuku to burst onto the public scene, Izuku is determined to finish the race in first place. But to use his still new quirk would mean breaking his bones. Using clever strategy, he claims first in the race, only to learn that coming first puts a target on his back in the next game. My main two thoughts are, 1. The argument made by the show that Class 1A is able to grow so much from being pushed by one crisis is a little bit hard to believe, and 2. Izuku's strategy at the end is very clever and enjoyable to watch. Episode 17. Strategy, strategy, strategy. A tier. Teams are made for the next game, a cavalry battle where each team has a headband of points that the other team can steal, and the top 4 teams at the end move on. But with such a target on Izuku's back, does his team stand a chance? While looking back at it, I can see how a team was formed for a working strategy made in advance by the author, but it doesn't really feel convenient or even forced. Shoto's line saying that he won't use his flame is also a great setup for his arc. Episode 18, Cavalry Battle Finale. B tier. The cavalry battle continues, but things start going wrong for Izuku, and his headband is stolen. Izuku's team sneaks by, stealing just enough points at the end to qualify for the next round. I liked this episode, but found the ending, a hidden headband stolen off screen that places his team fourth, to be a little bit cheap. It's still good, but an ending like that doesn't have to be hidden from the audience just for the surprise that Izuku is moving on. Episode 19. The Boy Born with Everything. D tier. The games pause briefly as the field is prepared for the next event, and Izuku has a direct talk with Shoto. Finally, the games resume, and Izuku faces Hitoshi. And what's happened to Izuku? Shoto talking about quirk marriages is interesting and important, but it's undermined by seeing the exact same visual scene repeatedly in flashbacks. And watching the show, being in the audience, knowing exactly the answer of what happened to Izuku, and also knowing that Izuku was told what was going to happen, told explicitly to avoid responding to Hitoshi, because it seems like he's able to mind control those who respond to him, and then watching Izuku immediately respond is the worst moment in the show so far. Episode 20. Victory or Defeat. The first F tier, the battle, if you can call it that, between Izuku and Hitoshi continues. Izuku is in a trance, walking himself out of the arena. A flash of 8 forms appears in his trance, and Izuku's finger impulsively flicks. The shockwave wakes him from the trance, and he turns, beating Hitoshi. Shoto, in the match that follows, dominates. Following the annoyance caused by Izuku being warned of the threat and immediately falling into the trap last episode, this episode does nothing to redeem it. It's an 8-minute quote-unquote fight of Izuku slowly walking off the field, jam-packed with internal dialogue and exposition. I think some of the questions it poses about the world are interesting, such as the emphasis the society places on physical quirks and the inherent unintentional discrimination against those with quirks that aren't built for fighting in the right circumstances, even when those quirks can be more powerful than the physical fighting quirks. And then Izuku breaking out of the mind control is bullcrap, and the ex post facto buyback of Izuku using the vision to fight the mind control is nonsense. Either he is unable to control his body under Hitoshi's mind control, or he isn't. The episode does end on a good cliffhanger, though. Episode 21. Battle on, Challengers, C tier. The festival continues with one-on-one battles, and, well, I mean, that's kind of it. There are a few funny moments, and it sets up the power dynamics well. It also reminds me of a writing note. Write each character like they believe they're the main character because they are of their life, and this episode did a good job at that. But in the end, this episode is mainly just build-up. Episode 22. Bakugo vs. Uraraka. A tier. Ochako Uraraka faces down Katsuki Bakugo in their one-on-one match, enduring a seeming one-sided beatdown. It's revealed to be part of her strategy to use loose rubble from the match as a weapon, releasing it from her zero-gravity hold when she gains a critical mass. Bakugo's sheer explosive power is still enough, however, and he claims the victory. I think the strategy is clever, but I don't understand how so few audience members noticed a cloud of rock in the sky, or how the only visual clue to her strategy was that she was low to the ground, and the dust created a smokescreen. I just feel that the show is written that way specifically to create the jarring shock of hopelessness to hope as we root for Uraraka without concern for believability. And having audience members shocked doesn't mean it's believable, and without any visual hint that there's more going on. And no, not being able to see anything due to a smokescreen isn't a hint. It's a little jarring and not well set up. I still like it, it's still great, but it's held back by that element. Episode 23. Shoto Todoroki Origin. A second S tier. Shoto Todoroki, disavowing his father by using just his ice power, faces Izuku in battle. Izuku demands Shoto use all his powers, his and not his father's. Izuku flicks, using the full strength of One for All, blocking each of Shoto's ice attacks, but breaking each of his fingers. He still won't give up though, and flicks again with each broken finger. As Izuku's defense grows weaker, Shoto is becoming overwhelmed by the cold his ice power brings. We see of Shoto's youth and his traumatic family life, and see, suddenly, his left side bursts with flame. Izuku loses the match, but for just a moment had freed Shoto from his past. This episode is great because interwoven in the fight is meaning and character. The flashbacks fit perfectly into the character arc, displaying intentions, obstacles, traumas, and fears. Even the festival's audience commentary adds something rather than just explaining what happened. Izuku's innate heroism stands out, as does Shoto's traumatic past. Episode 24. Fight on, Ida. A tier. Izuku and Shoto face the fallout from their battle, both physically and emotionally as the festival continues on. Tenya Ida's brother and role model finds and is defeated by the hero killer. But meddling where you don't need to is the essence of being a hero, is a good line. And this episode furthers the story and makes characters' motivations and powers clear. Episode 25. Todoroki vs. Bakugo. C tier. The finale of the festival, the match that will decide the winner, Todoroki vs. Bakugo. It has all led to this in Bakugo, thanks to Shoto's inner conflict leaving him weak-footed, wins, however much he would have preferred to win against Shoto's full power. Tenya leaves early after learning his brother is in critical condition in the hospital. This episode wraps up the festival well enough, but even while I understand the inner conflict holding Shoto back, it felt like it ended on a bit of a whimper. And on that note, Bakugo's actions are very heavy-handed and annoying in this episode, even though his goal was understandable. Undisputed success that isn't tarnished by a conflicted and weak opponent. So, yes, understandable, even kind of nice, below the very, very rough surface. Episode 26, Time to Pick Some Names, D tier. The students choose their hero names, and with the invitations being made after the festival, which internship they'll take. But did Tenya pick his internship to get revenge on his brother's attacker? Bakugo's hyper-personality can be funny in episodes like this, but overall there's not much to write home about. It's fine filler and build up to the next arc, but that's really all that it is. Episode 27, Bizarre, Gran Torino appears. C tier. The students head out for on-the-ground learning from experienced pro-heroes and their agencies. The address Izuku is given for his internship leads him to a strange, beat-down house. Inside is Gran Torino, All Might's mentor, but is he dead? Crazy? Or just what Izuku needs to learn a valuable lesson about his quirk, one for all? No, maybe, and yes, that the quirk isn't like a light switch. Izuku learns to manage one for all at 5%, the percent that his body can handle at that time. There's some important power development and also an interesting point that Izuku believes all for one equals All Might, when it's more like a tool that one person could wield one way and another. Episode 28, Midoriya and Shigaraki, C tier. Izuku begins implementing the lessons Gran Torino gave him, and the other students continue their internships. Shigaraki releases Nomus on the city, and Tenya, splitting from his mentor, confronts Stain, his brother's attacker. This episode is continued setup for what's coming, the battle with Stain, the Nomu attack, and All for One's eventual introduction. But it's well executed. Izuku's training is also engaging, and Tenya's intention and struggle is made more clear. Episode 29, Hero Killer, Stain versus UA students, S tier. With the hero's hands full with the Nomus loose in the city, Izuku rushes to find Tenya, missing in all the action. He finds Tenya and another hero paralyzed and sends a cryptic message, just his location, to the other UA students, and faces Stain, whose ideology becomes clear. When Stain consumes a drop of Izuku's blood, Izuku is also paralyzed. Shoto arrives just in time to protect Izuku and the others. Stain's quirk, that how long the paralysis lasts depends on blood type, is learned, and the heroes work together to challenge Stain. What makes this episode great is the conflict of ideology. The fact that Stain's criticisms make sense, and the question of what do you do in a world you find corrupt is interesting. After all, there are a lot of heroes who are really in this just for the fame, reputation, and personal reasons, and not to be a hero. Tenya's fury is understandable, and yet his actions are clearly self-motivated and filled with hatred. Mix in with that Izuku and Shoto's genuine heroism, whose true desire to protect puts them in the right with their opponent, who still must face them to root out the, in his view, fakes. It's a beautiful clash physically and ideologically. That leaves me with questions about this society and how it could be improved. Episode 30, Climax, A tier. Izuku, Shoto, and Tenya work together to defeat Stain and manage to restrain him. Endeavor, Shoto's father, defeats a Nomu and sends the heroes in the area to help the students. Stain breaks free and stand against all the gathered heroes. When a flying Nomu grabs Izuku, Stain leaps into action and kills the Nomu. When Endeavor arrives, Stain, preparing to fight, all the gathered heroes states that society must be purged of all its fake heroes and pathetic criminals. He collapses, internal damage to his organs making it impossible to stand. It's a flawed but grand climax. I enjoyed seeing Endeavor's expertise, which made me respect him as a fighter, if not a man. But Stain's defeat was lackluster. An unseen broken rib causing him to faint when his speech has every single hero frozen in fear? Sure, I guess. His rescue of Izuku was cool though, and shows the extent of his ideology. He is willing to protect those he believes are true heroes. Episode 31, The Aftermath of Hero Killer, Stain, D tier. As the students are privately praised for their heroic actions, it is made clear they violated regulations on quirk use, but they're offered a compromise. The public narrative becoming that Endeavor defeated the Stain but they're allowed to continue their path to become heroes, or they get the glory but are unable to continue down the path of becoming a hero. They choose the former. Meanwhile, the other students continue in their internships, and the Villain League, boosted by Stain's legacy, grows. This episode is all conclusion and setup, which is fine. Stories need it, but it isn't that great on its own. It has some good setup for what's coming in the next season, and poses interesting thoughts by having Stain become an icon for a movement against the hyper-regulated society. I also, looking back at it, appreciate how much the students had to struggle to defeat Stain. Episode 32. Everyone's Internships. C tier. The students continue their internships. There you have it. It's a pretty middle-of-the-road episode with clear setup for what happens to Bakugo in the next season, and the students all learn some valuable lessons. Not super impactful to the overall story, but good. Episode 33. Listen Up! A Tale from the Past. B tier. As school picks up again, the students can feel how much they've grown. All Might tells Izuku of the history of One for All and All for One, and the war that inheriting his quirk puts Izuku in the center of. One for All, a power-hungry dictator who can steal, combine, and transfer quirks, and those who have resisted him over the years. It's good world building, and it's nice to see the grand picture. It's also fun seeing the students' growth. Again, I don't understand the perverts and hypersexualized characters in anime, but it's not enough to undermine what's good about this episode. Episode 34. Gearing up for final exams. D tier. The students prepare for their exams and the time arrives. They take the written portion, head out, and learn of the second portion, facing a UA mentor. I can't say it's bad, but I also feel like it's a lot of filler. What it does best is display the intensity of the final exams and sow seeds of doubt about Bakugo's heroic intentions. After learning, the League of Villains aims to bring Bakugo to their side. Episode 35. Yaoyorozu Rising. D tier. The students are grouped in pairs to face a mentor. In particular, Momo Yaoyorozu and Shoto Todoroki are assigned to face Eraserhead. Momo is extremely unconfident after seeing everything Shoto has done compared to what she's accomplished. Her unconfidence leads to Shoto making the plan for them. As it turns out, Momo's plan, that she wasn't confident enough to share until they were backed into a corner, worked where Shoto's didn't. This episode's dialogue is extremely on the nose, both in its portrayal of Momo being unconfident and the sideline commentary from the students who watch, both of which do make some sense, but neither were written in a way that worked for me. Episode 36. Stripping the Varnish. Another D tier. The finals continue pitting the students against their weaknesses, such as Jiro's fear of insects. This episode is alright, and the challenges for each character make sense, but a lot of it is just cool visuals and demonstrations of extreme power. Also, Mineta's worldview and intentions are backwards, and his character usually irritates me, but it was kind of sweet hearing him say that the other students inspired him. Episode 37. Katsuki Bakugo Origin. Launches up to A tier. The final pair of students, Izuku and Bakugo, must face and defeat All Might. The conflict between the rival students is a greater foe even than All Might. Izuku wants to strategize a way around, while Bakugo wants to take this chance to face All Might one-on-one. They're in each other's way, but when facing defeat, the two manage to work together just enough to pass the test. I think the school forcing their conflicting personalities and worldviews to work together is nice, as is the fight sequence, but Bakugo's personality sometimes really holds back episodes, and this would have been rated higher without some of its excesses. Episode 38. Encounter. B tier. The students preparing for the coming training camp go to the mall together. Izuku is met, threatened, and interrogated by the villain Shigaraki. It's a solid closing to a season, and has some interesting questions about popularity and ideology, including one that I made earlier, that while I don't agree with the hero killer and found his actions reprehensible, I understood his philosophy. Meanwhile, Shigaraki is more of a mystery, and I don't really understand his philosophy of destruction. Season 2 is a good continuation of the story. It doesn't always do a fantastic job at keeping me fully engaged in the transition episodes, or the episodes that are focused solely on side characters, like the final exam episodes. It also had the first F tier, with episode 20, Victory or Defeat. But despite its rough edges, such as early Bakugo, this season does a good job at showing Izuku's journey to become a hero, and sets up early hints at what's coming down the line. Episode 39. Game Start. C tier. Learning that the girls have received permission to use the pool, Denki Kaminari and Minoru Mineta hatch a plot to witness women in bikinis. Their plan: accidentally schedule a pool training session at the same time, and invite an honorable student like Izuku Midoriya to make their story believable. Everything backfires, however, when they arrive, and Izuku has invited all the men, and the two are now stuck training together with all the other men as the women watch. This episode is funny. Having two pervy boys invite Izuku and have it backfire in their faces is both funny and makes the situation very believable. And the pool is a new fun way to see the students train. However, as is usual with the beginnings of new seasons, the flashbacks are excessive. Episode 40, Wild Wild Pussycats, A tier. The students' summer camp training begins abruptly when at a rest stop, meeting their summer camp mentors, a group of heroes known as the Wild Wild Pussycats. Their car drives away and they're forced to battle their way through a forest of dirt monsters to make it in time for dinner. In the home they're staying at, a boy named Kota grumbles his way around the heroes. He hates heroes, and has ever since his parents, pro-heroes themselves, were killed in the line of duty. I like the training and the goals it presents here, and watching the students push their way through it. Episode 41, Kota, A tier. In the second day of the training, the students push their quirks to the limits. Kota keeps himself away from the heroes, even telling Izuku bluntly, when Izuku tries to reach out a friendly hand, that heroes are all words, and words don't mean much compared to action. As the training winds down for the day and the students play a game, the League of Villains teleports in and begins its second attack on UA. The foreshadowing is great here, and the training is better than some battles. Episode 42, My Hero, S tier. The League of Villains attack on UA's training camp continues. As it does, the pro-heroes try to protect the students, both from the villains and the laws restricting unregistered, non-professional quirk use. Izuku realizes that Kota is missing, and rushes to find him, arriving just as one of the villains begins to attack Kota. Izuku struggles hard and manages to just defeat the villain, but breaks both arms in the process, having been required to attack with a 1,000,000% Delaware Detroit smash. The fighting in this episode is good, but not the greatest, and 1,000,000% power makes my eyes roll, even though the show buys it back after the battle by saying it's an emergency situation, and adrenaline, not literal. But both of these things hold the episode back somewhat. What I liked about it, and what brings it to S tier, is watching Izuku's heroic nature and passion for protecting others change Kota's worldview. Episode 43, Drive It Home, Iron Fist, A tier. Izuku rushes back to camp with Kota on his back, and Eraserhead gives the students permission to fight back, and a counterattack begins. As the students fight back, Tokoyami's quirk, Dark Shadow, takes control of him. I got lost in this episode, almost forgot that I was watching a show. I liked Class B's statement after defeating a villain that their, quote, one-track mind, previously used as an insult against them, leads them to, when anyone else would give up, quote, take another step, end quote. As usual, Izuku's determination is great, and in this episode, there's some solid setup for what the next episodes hold. Episode 44, Roaring Upheaval, A tier. The odds of the students making it through the attack seem impossible, with Izuku severely injured, Tokoyami's Dark Shadow out of control, and such powerful enemies. Not only that, but the villains succeed in capturing Bakugo. The students rush to try to save him. This episode was pretty good. Toga is always kind of hard to watch, but the battles and strategies were fun. Episode 45, What a Twist! Another A tier. The battle concludes as the villains retreat, Bakugo kidnapped and in their hands. We learned that the villains intend to turn Bakugo from his explosive personality into a villain, fighting alongside them. The other students and the school begin to deal with the fallout of the second attack and the kidnapping of one and serious injury of many of their students. Even in the midst of the fallout, a few students are plotting to break the rules and save Bakugo themselves. It's a very solid episode with interesting insights into sensationalist media, unintentionally doing exactly what the villains want, as well as the reveal in a top-level staff meeting that there must be a leak inside UA. I also appreciated the fact that it was as hard of a victory as it was for the students. It makes the story more interesting, leaving questions of how the villains will eventually be defeated, and uncertainty in the next steps, and gives characters room to grow. I also found the portrayal of the media really interesting. The sensationalism and mistrust that is planted by them is rooted in some reality, 2 attacks on the school, and most of the class being injured, and 1 student being kidnapped. But the coverage is also exactly what the villains want. Episode 46, From Ida to Midoriya, A tier. Tenya Ida, knowing that some of the students intend to break the rules in order to save Bakugo, steps in, trying to stop them. Having been the one to break the rules previously, he wants to preemptively save Izuku and Shoto, like they saved him. The pro-heroes prepare. This episode is the best build-up episode yet. It builds the world, the stakes, the ideologies of the characters, and yet it's all just build up to what comes next. And I love the fact that I was able to enjoy it. What makes it great is how the ideologies clash, and you can see each perspective, not just logically see the point and the counterpoint, but see how different experiences have shaped them, making characters feel responsible, powerless, or trust the system, or wanting to do whatever is in their power. Another interesting note is Izuku's mother's response after the attacks. Her worry is understandable, influenced by her love and the media portrayal of events. I see her perspective and how much it falls in line with what the villains want the public to believe. I see her perspective even as I side with Izuku. Episode 47, All for One. Again, A tier. The heroes respond, leaping into action and quickly, decisively defeat the League of Villains and save Bakugo. Suddenly, all those that they captured teleport away, and the true head of the League of Villains, All for One, Shigaraki's almost father-like mentor, appears. His power is so great that his mere presence brings the students to freeze. This episode is great because it shows the heroes in a very respectable light. We see their planning, professionalism, and skill, and then rips that rug out right from under our feet. Episode 48, Symbol of Peace. A tier. The pro-heroes rush to respond to the devastating turn of tides brought by All for One's appearance. The students, seeing that Bakugo's capture is forcing the heroes to hold back, plot and execute a plan to rush in, save him, and get out. Their plan works, and All Might and All for One's battle truly begins. The students' plan working is a fantastic moment, and it's quite interesting to see how fatherly All for One is able to act. And having been under All for One's wing for so long, I can see how Shigaraki's worldview became warped. Episode 49, One for All, B tier. One for All and All for One's battle finishes, with All Might squeezing out a narrow victory and using the last of his power in the process. He gives one last word to the public, and Izuku, you're next. This episode was a lot of build-up for what, in the end, is 3 punches, and I've mentioned clashes of ideology as a positive before. But this is a good example of where that goes too far, where the proclamation of each ideology overtakes the story. I understand it here, and it is a fitting end to an era, but it also means it wasn't as good as the episodes leading up to it. Episode 50, End of the Beginning, Beginning of the End. C tier. The aftermath of the destructive battle between All for One and All Might hits as society begins facing the prospect of life without the symbol of peace. UA proposes and sends their teachers out to get permission for school dormitories, both for the students' protection and also to check that there isn't a traitor among them. In this episode, Izuku's mother's burst, while understandable, isn't set up enough for me to really believe it. We've seen her worry, but her inaction and side role is so flipped on its head for this episode and this episode alone. It's still fine, just nothing special. Episode 51, Moving into Dorms, D tier. The students move into the dorms and have a contest to see who has the best room. The students who saved Bakugo are confronted by Tsu, and also by Eraserhead. The room tours are kind of fun, but also not super impactful. Seeing Tsu and Eraserhead's criticism of the students who stepped in and saved Bakugo is a little weird. I guess, kind of like Izuku's mom, part of why I have a hard time with this is because while I'm able to comprehend it on an intellectual level, I don't emotionally resonate with them. Admittedly, partially because I know how the mission turned out, and that they did play a vital role. Episode 52, Create Those Ultimate Moves, D tier. With the students' sights set on getting their provisional licenses, they begin training their ultimate moves. Moves designed to ensure victory. It's a fine episode, but mostly I was just left waiting for the next one. Hatsume's determined obsessive personality is fun, and her saying that if you want to cool down your legs, use your arms, leading to Izuku breaking through the perspective of seeing One for All through the lens of just All Might was pretty good, if a little forced. Ultimately though, this episode mostly just feels like a way for characters to earn being a little bit more powerful in the coming episodes. As a side note, somehow this episode often felt flashbacky, even as it showed events as they were unfolding. Episode 53, The Test, A tier. The students, now armed with their ultimate moves, head to the test to get their provisional licenses, only to find that UA is always at a huge disadvantage. Because of the UA festival, the other schools know their quirks. The jokes in this episode landed, and the build-up was nice. as was the comment on Eraserhead still having all 20 students. Nieto, normally obnoxious in his superiority, was funny in this one when he sighed in relief upon learning that the classes would be tested separately. I also appreciated that the episode sneaks in a student saying that he's seen them on TV, and the class takes that as a good thing, rather than the threat that it is. Episode 54. Shiketsu High Lurking. F tier. The provisional license exam begins with UA as the target. This episode was bad because it felt like nothing mattered. Utsushimi is also quite obnoxious, in the same way that Toga is. Hint hint, nudge nudge. There were also no fights, just a bunch of balls thrown wildly. It is gearing up for the provisional license arc, but this episode is just bad. Episode 55, Class 1A. A tier. The UA students continue the test. Shoto passes quickly, but the limited slots are filling quickly. Momo, Tsuyu, and Kyoka also pass. The battles were pretty good, as were the strategies used. I liked seeing Shoto's complete domination, and the battle against Psycho's hyper-intelligence was, despite my initial concerns, quite good. It also stood out in this episode that I think some of my love for this show comes from the biggest reason that I like Fairy Tail. The familial way the friends stand up for each other and protect one another. But more than that, I just love the story and the clash of worldviews. I also, in this episode, liked hearing Eraserhead state that Izuku and Bakugo's passion has raised the standard for the whole class, as well as Joke being surprised at how much he likes this class of students. Episode 56, Rush. B tier. Slots are filling up quickly, and the remainder of Class 1A fights desperately to advance. The final students make it just in the nick of time. The first half of this episode was great. The second was fine. Seeing Bakugo's more respectful and heroic side, as well as his fighting talent, noted and explained by Kaminari's internal monologue of Bakugo using small, targeted explosions to not harm innocent people, was refreshing. It was also cool, and a little shocking to hear Bakugo note that Izuku had made the quirk his own, showing how much he's really paid attention. The rest of it was whatever, a little hard to believe that the final 9 UA students filled 9 of the 10 final remaining slots, but okay, fine, whatever. Episode 57, Rescue Exercises, F tier. The second and final phase of the provisional license exam kicks off when the students are forced suddenly into a staged disaster rescue operation. But wait, the emergency site is also being attacked? I understand and even like the scenario that the students were forced into, but it felt like very little happened. The biggest event, other than the setup of a simulated attack, was the group deciding to split their efforts. A lot of nothing in between. Episode 58, Special Episode, Save the World with Love, B tier. Breaking from the main arc, this episode shows a few of the students taking a special summer course where they act as detectives to find answers in a staged crisis. This filler, special episode is in the end mostly a promotion for the first My Hero Academia movie. The detective aspect of it was kind of fun and different. Izuku's deduction ability was very, almost unbelievably good, and the conclusion was funny. Having All Might breathe because he's just acting dead, being a clue that his character was also just pretending to be dead, as if the students were supposed to accept that All Might had to literally die to have the character he was playing be dead. Ultimately, it's a pointless episode, but a fun one. Episode 59. What's the big idea? C tier. The second test of the provisional license exam continues with Gang Orca, a popular hero, acting as the villain, simulating an attack on the scene of the disaster. 2 people, Shoto and Nisana, step up to face him, but get in each other's way. I liked a lot of this episode, but felt the primary conflict of the episode between Shoto and Nisana felt forced, from the way their attacks perfectly collided with and diluted the others, to the backstory of Isana's dislike of Shoto and his father. The resolution was kind of nice, but the conflict was not appealing to me. One thing that I appreciated was hearing the thoughts of those who organized the events and their goal, now that the symbol of peace is gone, to replace it with a strong, unified group of heroes. Episode 60. A Talk About Your Quirk. C tier. After the provisional license exam, All Might confronts All for One in his maximum security prison, and Bakugo confronts Izuku, demanding answers about his quirk. I don't really know what to get from All Might's confrontation with All for One, except that All for One has a clear understanding of what's going on in the outside world, and that he is confident he will escape. And Bakugo's reasoning to believe correctly that Izuku got his quirk from All Might was quite good. It's a fine conclusion to the provisional license exam arc, and sets up the next episode. Episode 61, Deku vs. Kacchan, Part 2, S tier. Bakugo demands a fight against Izuku. Izuku hesitantly, then seriously fights back. Their clash is ended when All Might arrives and explains everything to Bakugo. Izuku and Bakugo leave as proper rivals. This is another clear clash of ideology, largely within Bakugo himself. He's been holding All Might's downfall against himself. In his eyes, it was his capture that led to All Might's downfall. The battle of ideas of what it means to be a hero, whether it's winning or protecting others, or, as All Might suggests, both. To win as a hero, you must save people, and to save people, you must win. It's nice seeing Bakugo, still being Bakugo, grow into what I think is a truly proper rival. His determination is still there when he states that he'll surpass Izuku, even if he is the chosen one. And when Izuku responds that he'll go even higher than that, watching Bakugo's personality explode back, but in a different way, was kind of funny. Episode 62, A Season for Encounters, D tier. Villainy is on the rise, and the League of Villains is hard at work behind the scenes. The students are introduced to work studies, and those with hero licenses are invited to find one. UA's Big three top-notch heroes, tell them more about work studies. Ultimately, I feel like I watched almost nothing, as is usual with lower-tier episodes. It's building to something, sure, but it's not that interesting on its own. Episode 63, Unrivaled, B tier. The Big Three tell the students more about work studies, and Mirio challenges the entirety of Class 1A to a fight, all against him. His quick and total defeat of Class 1A inspires them to learn on the ground. After all, if he can use a quirk as challenging as his so well thanks to on-the-ground experience, they can improve too. The Big Three were funny, and Mirio's battling and strategy were clever, both in their use in the story, advancing work studies, and how they were used. A power that has significant challenges and weaknesses that he's overcome. Season 3 was great, though it had some rough bits during the provisional license exam. The story was exciting, it had a lot of great episodes, and the proper introduction of All for One, and great development to Izuku and Bakugo's rivalry. Episode 64, The Scoop on UA, Class 1A, D tier. A freelance reporter visits UA on a mission to prove his theory, that All Might has chosen a successor among UA's Class 1A. He discovers that it's Izuku and talks with him, before heading back to the news organization and claiming the story was a dud. This season's opening was just that, a season start recap designed solely to refresh our memories of the story thus far. Nothing really happens, and I find the reporter somewhat obnoxious, which, when he's the center character of the episode, works to its demerit. Episode 65, Overhaul, C tier. The League of Villains meets with the leader of the criminal organization, Shi Hasaikai, both sides looking for the other to join their rank. The power struggle leads to a clash, leaving one dead on each side, and the League of Villains wants revenge. Meanwhile, the students prepare for their work studies, and Mirio agrees to introduce Izuku to Night Eye. This episode is flashback and setup heavy. As a side note, the cliffhanger for the next episode was funny. Episode 66, Boy Meets D tier. Izuku faces the cold eyes of Night Eye, who firmly believes that Mirio, not Izuku, should be All Might's successor. After a test displays Izuku's careful and intentional fighting, as well as his love of All Might, Izuku is accepted into the work study with Night Eye's goal being to convince Izuku to give up his power and pass it on to Mirio. The test felt like it took forever, and I think the idea of a character challenging Izuku as the wrong choice of a successor is a great aspect to the story overall, but this episode isn't really a good demonstration of that. Episode 67, Fighting Fate, B tier. Izuku's work study starts seriously and suddenly when, on patrol, he and Mirio run into the target of their secret investigation, led by Night Eye. Overhaul. And a bandaged child, Eri. All Might also tells of Night Eye's foresight predicting All Might's death. I like the confrontation, and the character's motivations make sense. Izuku feeling hollow as he's unable to save someone right in front of him, and the decision of the experienced pros to wait and make a single decisive blow, and not engage in an immediate chase where the villains escape and flee deeper into hiding, and the villains' veiled threats against Eri make sense. All Might talking with Izuku about Night Eye felt like it took a lot longer than it needed to. Episode 68. Let's Go, Gutsy Red Riot, A tier. The students who were chosen for work studies begin, and the Villain League and the villain league joins with the Shihasakai, if only for eventual revenge. In the midst of stopping a small gang of criminals, Tamaki and Eijiro are shot with small darts that can temporarily remove quirks. Eijiro, protected by hardening, captures the criminal, even as the criminal uses an injection that boosts his quirk. It's a good episode where I'm able to learn, without it feeling overly explained, what I need to about quirk drugs and the progress that Red Riot Eijiro has made. I also really appreciated that I believed the villain's loss, and it doesn't feel like Red Riot won solely because the writers created an enemy with a quirk that couldn't work against him. Episode 69, An Unpleasant Talk, B tier. The heroes discuss their plan to invade the Shihasakai hideout. In this episode, there were far too many questions asked, interrupting the meeting. I understand they're used to keep the audience up to date with what the heroes know, but the amount was ridiculous. Even the interruptions to stop the interruptions were annoying. The presentation itself was fine and informative. I also liked Naide's comment that Izuku's determination to save people was similar to All Might's. Episode 70. Go. B tier. The students stress the heroes' study, and the villains continue. Finally, however, the heroes have enough evidence to justify commencing the operation. As soon as the heroes arrive, the villains begin to move. This episode has a lot of flashbacks and tense build-up. There's nothing great about it, not even the start of the raid, and nothing terrible about it. The flashbacks are on the bad side, but not ruinous. There's just nothing great or terrible about it. Episode 71, Sun Eater of the Big Three, C tier. With the raid underway, 3 villains stand in the way between the heroes and Eri. Tamaki tells the others to move ahead and faces the 3 villains himself, defeating them. The flashback to start the episode wasn't my favorite, and how long it takes the heroes to leave Tamaki to battle annoyed me. I'll take them on myself. 3 minutes later. No, seriously, go ahead, I'll take them. It was also interesting to see how much hope the Shihasakai brought the villains. The ending to the episode was pretty good, if somewhat predictable. Episode 72, Red Riot, B tier. Both Fat Gum and Red Riot leap to save Eraserhead and are forced into battle. Eijiro Kirishima, Red Riot, must face both the enemy in front of him and his past. He overcomes both. It's good, especially for how much of it is flashback. There's a little too much of the trope of, I refuse to lose, leading to victory. But I think the metaphor of a shield and a shield versus a spear and a shield was good, and the solution of Fat Gum's fat being turned into energy and power was fine, if a little bit convenient. Episode 73, Temp Squad, C tier. The heroes press forward and are unexpectedly confronted by the League of Villains. There's too much build-up without payoff to be great, but it was interesting to see Kendo's unique motivations, the thrill of fighting, allow him to help Eijiro with both medical supplies and information. Episode 74, Lemillion, S tier. The villains have 5 darts that can completely remove quirks. Not temporarily like the ones seen previously. Mirio, being able to move through walls, reaches Eri before the others, and faces a team of grunts by himself. Before the others arrive, he is struck by a quirk-removing dart, but continues fighting on, quirkless. The fighting was fantastic. I even thought his ability to fight through a drunken feeling caused by a grunt's quirk, because he's experienced so much battle without sight and feeling made sense. His precision and ability to kick his leg through Eri's head, but materializing it just as it passes and impacts the villain, was fantastic. I loved his genuine heroics demonstrated when he fights, injured, having lost his quirk for Eri. Episode 75, Unforeseen Hope, C tier. Izuku and the other heroes arrive. Izuku and Eraserhead rush in and challenge Chisaki, who on the verge of defeat joins his power and body with those of others, increasing his strength drastically. The ground above him bursts and more heroes enter. In this episode, I appreciate Rocklock's motivations more than I have previously, and it's a cool moment when Overhaul acknowledges Mirio's power as he joins himself with another, and his genuine disgust at his power was also a good justification for him not starting off so ridiculously overpowered, but only using it as a last resort. Episode 76, Infinite 100%, A tier. Eri runs to the ever more powerful Chisaki in order to stop the pain of the heroes. As she does, Izuku runs in to protect her from her trained instinct of self-blame and rescue her for good. Izuku, through the help of Eri's power, the ability to reverse time for those she touches, survives, despite Night Eye's foresight telling him that Izuku would die. This episode is good. Toga's appearance, disguised as Deku, was a great way for her to increase the chaos, as it is to more fully understand Eri's quirk, and the comparison between her use of her quirk and Izuku's early use, where any use whatsoever would destroy his body, made sense, either 0% or 100%. Ultimately, this episode is again held back by flashbacks that interrupt what is ultimately 1 minute of action. Episode 77, Bright Future, B tier. Izuku, paired with Eri's healing, being able to use All for One at 100% without concern, defeats Chisaki. But the battle was not painless. Many are injured, and Mirio has lost his quirk. Night Eye and All Might make up at last, but only on Night Eye's deathbed. It's a good conclusion, tying up loose ends and setting up the next arc. I can kind of understand why Night Eye has to die, specifically that Eri can't be a simple solve all. That's just bad writing. And her instability makes sense, shown by having Eraserhead temporarily erase her quirk in order to save Izuku from it. But there's part of me that questions the decision. Couldn't they try? But it is still a pretty good episode. Episode 78, Smoldering Flames, B tier. The students have recovered and are being sent home, except Mirio, who reminds the regretful Izuku to smile. The provisional license remedial course for those who failed the second half of the test continues. This episode is good, but a solid bit of it is just a recap montage. Episode 79, Win Those Kids' Hearts, A tier. Shoto and Bakugo and the other trainees continue the provisional license remedial course, and are faced with a surprise test. A class of children who don't respect their teacher or heroes. Watching them from the stands, Endeavor asks All Might what it means to be the #1 hero. There were quite a few funny moments, even if the kids were a little annoying. For example, Bakugo's solution to rebellious children being to find their leader, hang him up, and throw stones at him to destroy their notion of power. It was funny and in character. The greatest part was Endeavor, up to now an extremely proud and angry man, reaching out and asking All Might, who for so long had just been an obstacle to him, for guidance. Episode 80, Relief for Licensed Trainees, B tier. The young children, now in outright rebellion against the trainees, are put back in their place, in a manner that is decisive, intentional, and respectful. The trainees create a playground. After the day's training ends, Endeavor approaches Shoto and apologizes, saying that he will become a hero that Shoto can look up to. At the dorms, Aoyama is acting strange. It's good, and I liked both the students' solution and Endeavor's growth, but at the end of the day, it's nothing to write home about. Episode 81, School Festival, C tier. Class 1A prepares for the coming school festival, deciding that their contribution will be a musical performance. Izuku invites the emotionally scarred Eri to come and see him perform in it. The gentle criminal plots to gain more internet fame by attacking Yue. I like seeing Eri and how this episode uses Eri's trauma as a way to put stakes in something that is ultimately as low stakes as a high school festival. Other than that, however, I have no opinion on the rest of the episode. It's fine. Episode 82, Preparing for the School Festival, is the funnest part, D tier. Class 1A prepares for the school festival with dance training, planning practical effects, and choosing who will play the instruments. Meanwhile, gentle criminal plots and All Might teaches Izuku how to control All for One better. There are a few good moments and lessons learned by Izuku mixed in with preparing for the event. The idea of having Aoyama act as a disco ball, and having him like the idea. Episode 83, Gold Tips Imperial, C tier. Eri visits the school to warm reception, and Gentle Criminal has his plan to attack Yue figured out. Eri was cute to see now that she's out of the Hisakai hell. Izuku getting fired from the dance team was funny, and well set up. Gentle Criminal's intentions are strange, but understandable enough. He, like Stain, wants to make a specific point and change. Episode 84, Deku vs. Gentle, D tier. Izuku, grabbing last-minute supplies for their performance, runs into Gentle Criminal, and realizes he's there to attack Yue. Izuku must protect the festival. It's a fight that took 3 times longer than anything that happens in it, and there were a lot of flashbacks. Gentle Criminal's passion for tea, leading him to make a mistake, was funny, and it's cool to see Izuku's new move with the support item, a wrist air cannon. Ultimately, though, I don't really care much about Gentle Criminal and La Brava's entire life stories. Episode 85, School Festival Start, D tier. Izuku faces Gentle Criminal, whose power is now boosted by La Brava's love. Izuku manages to defeat Gentle Criminal and keep the school festival from being shut down. The coolest moment was watching Izuku use his incredible memory and on-the-ground thinking to use Gentle Criminal's air trampolines to bounce a blast from his air cannon. I was indifferent to the rest of it, though the idea of a man so set on fame and being a historic figure was interesting. I just didn't care for the execution. Episode 86, Let It Flow, School Festival, B tier. The school festival begins and Class 1A performs for the school, and Eri. Eri makes this episode work. Seeing her smile was a great moment. The students who were haters, hoping for the class to fail, were annoying, and I don't completely get how they changed by the end of the performance. It was kind of hard to believe. I also don't entirely understand Gentle Criminal, or how Izuku might have become him. Sure, they both wanted to be heroes, but it's not as simple as want to be hero, be unable to do so, become a criminal. They are two very different people after all. But still, it's a solid conclusion to the festival arc. Episode 87, Japanese Hero Billboard Chart, C tier. The Billboard charts a ranking of the most popular heroes arrives, and the number one hero is Endeavor. Hawks tells Endeavor about Nomu sightings. As they speak, a new Nomu, the most powerful yet, suddenly shows up looking to defeat the strongest man, Endeavor. I don't really care for the Billboard charts, and it's always strange but justified in later episodes why Hawk leads Endeavor on such a journey based solely on a rumor. I guess I just wish that there was a little bit more explained here to justify that. Episode 88, His Start, S tier. It's Endeavor versus the most powerful Nomu yet, and the world is watching. It's make or break time for the new number one hero. He manages to take down the Nomu, keeping damage to the city at a minimum. He stands victoriously, though injured, with a fist raised, just like All Might did before him. This episode makes me respect Endeavor for his iron-willed determination and the restraint he displays while fighting within the city. I love that I can see his ideology losing some of its roughest edges, and him changing with it. It sets up the challenges of the world to come. The Nomu having the ability to speak is a great way to display its intelligence and, therefore, power. And I appreciated how Shoto's mother, Endeavor's wife, who has serious problems with the man, her support for Endeavor allowed me to feel more excitement and hope. It's good setup for what comes next in the Todoroki family story. I also thought that Hawk's statement that while everyone else had given up on number one during the time All Might was around, Endeavor kept pushing to surpass him, and what that reveals about Endeavor's character and determination, I thought it was quite insightful, and tells us a lot about who Endeavor is. OVA 1. Make It, Do or Die, Survival Training Part 1, D tier. Preparing for the provisional license exam, the students are put to the test in a manufactured crisis, a rescue mission that turns into a challenge to rescue themselves. It's a filler episode where stuff happens, mostly walking around, but I don't care because we're already past this point in the story. I understand the test and the pairings. Maybe the thing that I liked least about it was the fact that none of the students knew what they were supposed to do, whether they were supposed to act as heroes or as students and wait to be rescued. I understood why the thought comes, but it took up too much of the story. OVA 2. Make It, Do or Die, Survival Training Part 2, D tier. The first group of students escapes, but Izuku stays behind to make sure the others get out as well. They work together, using each of their strengths to the fullest, and make it out. I thought Izuku knowing Bakugo's strategy, showing how well they knew each other, was neat, if a little unbelievable. The exercise was intense, and I could see it stretching everyone to be better, but it is still quite forgettable, and ultimately unimportant. This season didn't really stand out. There's nothing terrible, but not a lot that's great either. The two best moments were Mirio fighting the Shiha Sakai and Endeavor battling the Nomu. Through these two, I got to see both incredible visuals and see their passion and good nature. The rest of the season is frequently flooded with flashbacks and or doesn't feel so vital to the story. It's good, worth the watch, but not as strong as it could have been. Episode 89, All Hands on Deck, Class 1A, A tier. UA has an emergency drill where Class 1A is called to help protect the school from hypothetical villains. It's a good opening, but in the end that's all that it is, a season opening. I liked seeing support for Endeavor and Hawk's intimidating presence in the post-credit scene, and knowing Dabi's coming role, I liked seeing him here too. Episode 90, Vestiges, S tier. Endeavor returns from the hospital and, for the first time in forever, returns home, to a dinner with his kids. Izuku has a strange dream of the Vestiges and history of One for All. I liked the twist of having Hawks as a secret agent, but would have preferred if the secret had been held a little bit longer. I love the Todoroki family story. I understand every side. The father looking to repent, the son who is unwilling to move on, the daughter who just wants a normal family, a wife who is traumatized and distant, and the son who is conflicted. Can he give his father a second chance? The story of One for All is somewhat interesting, as is seeing how One for All manipulates everything. But the Todoroki family is what makes this episode great. Episode 91, Clash, Class A versus Class B, D tier. Izuku asks All Might if he's had dreams about All for One, and finds that part of the dream was unique to him. Also, Class A and Class B begin a special training battle against one another. They are joined by a special guest, Hitoshi, looking to take a spot in the hero program. This episode felt like a lot of recap, even as it was a lot of new or valuable information to reintroduce, such as names and powers. I appreciated how Hitoshi's voice-changing device makes him actually intimidating, without having to rely on someone knowing the threat and acting foolishly despite it. He actually felt like a threat, and not something that the story forced in. Episode 92. Make it happen, Shinzo. A tier. Class A's first team, paired with Hitoshi Shinzo and his new equipment, use his helping hand to its fullest in their match against Class B. This was a really good episode, held back somewhat by flashbacks, but it used them in a way that usually helped the story, so not a bad use. I also liked seeing the distrust that Hitoshi's mind control sowed, and the quick wit and strategies used. Episode 93. Operation New Improv Moves. A tier. After reflecting on the first match and planning for the coming matches, Tokoyami looks to use his skills learned during his internship with Hawks against a foe, Kurohiro, who can enter shadows. Another really good episode. It showed great use of strategy and development, such as Tokoyami learning how to use his dark shadow to fly. Episode 94. Foresight. B tier. The match continues, and things have turned in Class B's favor. Yaoyo Rozu is separated from the rest of the team. She comes up with a strategy and hurls a bag of supplies to the team. The operation eventually fails, however, and Class B stands victorious. I liked the strategy and the communication of the plan through items rather than words, but very often strategy requires a lot of explaining, and this episode explains a lot, using a ton of onlooker commentary and internal monologue to do so. Episode 95. Match 3. C tier. Todoroki leads Class A, and Honenuki leads Class B. Can Class A Team 3 stand victorious in terrain that has been made unfavorable by Class B? Meanwhile, Endeavor continues his role as the number one hero. There are a lot of flashbacks in this episode, and it takes more than half the episode for things to actually start. And Ida's power increase due to a tune-up seems a little bit like an ex post facto justification to make him stronger. Endeavor's action as the symbol of peace proper are quite fun to watch. Episode 96. Match 3 Conclusion. A tier. Ida's Recipro Burst, a limited time hyperspeed boost, brings Class A way to fight back. Everything's on the line and it comes down to a one-on-one endurance match between Shoto's Heat and Tetsu's Iron Body. The battle ends in a tie, and I actually kind of appreciated the tie. It felt deserved. I liked everyone's determination, both in battle and to grow later on as well. Episode 97. Early Bird. S tier. In the fourth battle, Bakugo leads the Class 1A team, and the mutual trust by everyone to fill in when needed leads to a quick, decisive 4-0 victory. A complete blowout. Pun absolutely intended. It felt a little weird putting this in S, but looking at the top of A tier, this is clearly in a different league. It's the best Bakugo episode so far. I love seeing how much he's grown while seeing Bakugo still being Bakugo. It's also quite fun watching someone who has complete domination of the field. There's a little too much exposition, and the win to save people to win realization by All Might and Izuku was a little bit cheesy, but still a good way to show Bakugo's growth. Episode 98. That Which is Inherited. C tier. The final match begins, and Izuku freezes in the middle of battle, with dark tendrils bursting forth from his body. The great twist of My Hero Academia has arrived. One for All carries multiple quirks with it. This episode makes a great dramatic change to the story, and the build-up was there, and the twist is crazy. Even good. But this particular episode is a lot of justification and demonstration that it is not yet under Izuku's control. Episode 99. R Brawl. A tier. Izuku is freed from the mind haze by Ochako and Hitoshi exerting his mind control, and the match continues in an all-out brawl. It's nice seeing the powers introduced benefit Izuku, but not at all by this point make him unstoppable. I also liked that the teachers were prepared to step in if needed, but ultimately didn't stop the match. Episode 100. The New Power and All for One. C tier. As normal life resumes on campus for most, Izuku, Bakugo, and All Might discuss what the sudden addition of a quirk means and how to train it. Bakugo and Shoto have earned their provisional licenses, and running into a villain, put them to use immediately. There's nothing special here. A lot of explaining what this means for the story and how it happened. It is a little weird to hear for the first time that One for All is a stockpiling quirk, but it also makes sense and is a good revelation. Episode 101, Have a Merry Christmas. F tier. The students celebrate Christmas, unaware of the threat coming down the pike. There were a few nice moments and a little plot building. Aerie was cute when she arrived, but it's quite a large nothing burger in the end. Episode 102, Off to Endeavor's Agency. C tier. As the pause on work studies end, Izuku and Bakugo join Shoto for an internship under the new #1 hero, Endeavor. The internship and seeing what it took to be a top pro hero was cool, and Hawks giving an Endeavor a book with only certain words highlighted was an interesting code. It was also interesting seeing the darker side of the hero world in Hawks, to do evils in the name of an ultimate good, especially when you know where it leads in the story. Ultimately, it's a lot of build-up, but it's certainly not bad by any means. Episode 103, One Thing at a Time. A tier. The students continue their work studies, Endeavor leading those he took under his flame. Hawks learns more about the villain's moves and plans. In 4 months, everything will be destroyed. It's a clear threat, and it feels nice to have it laid out openly. Endeavor's advice makes a lot of sense, and his professional capabilities are genuinely impressive. Episode 104, Long Time No See, Selkie. D tier. Ochako and Sue's work-study agency partner up with Sue's first mentor, Selkie, for a Seaborn mission. The fight was ultimately just a couple of punches, and the pre-fight partying, while fine, I guess, was ultimately just showing off the ladies in bikinis. Perhaps most interesting was the importation of quirk-boosting drugs, but it's nothing to write home about. Episode 105, The Hellish Todoroki Family. D tier. The three students continue their work-study under Endeavor when he brings them over to his house to meet his other children. I almost rated this episode higher until I realized this is literally all stuff we know. The students are training under Endeavor. Known. But are slower than him. Known. And Endeavor's past was messed up. Known and shown in flashbacks we've already seen. And a dinner at the Todoroki house. That we've seen before, but this time Izuku and Bakugo are there. The only thing that advanced the plot in the slightest was Endeavor's shrine to Toya. It was nice, and I liked seeing the Todoroki family, but just give me something new, not only flashbacks and repeats. Episode 106, The Unforgiven. S tier. As Natsu leaves the dinner, he is suddenly assaulted by a recently released criminal, a criminal superfan whose sole wish is to die at Endeavor's hands. When Endeavor freezes up, Izuku, Shoto, and Bakugo rush in and save Natsu. I liked seeing how much the kids have grown, even if it is a little overemphasized. But most of all, I liked seeing Endeavor freeze and fear that his son will never speak to him again. I liked seeing Bakugo's cocky spirit shown in a statement that they, not Endeavor, won, and seeing that spirit dampened when he realizes that Endeavor doesn't care about him and is just worried about his son. I also really liked Endeavor's line to Shoto that he doesn't want forgiveness, he wants to atone. And, unlike the last episode, it isn't all stuff we've seen before. Episode 107, More of a Hero Than Anyone. A tier. The third term of the first year begins, and the students discuss their work studies. As they do, it is revealed that Kurogiri is a living, manipulated corpse, a Nomu, of a high school friend of President Mike and Eraserhead. I liked seeing in Nomu form a physical manifestation of what lengths All For One is willing to go, following dark, despicable, downright evil paths to reach his goal. Episode 108, My Villain Academia. D tier. 2 months prior to the previous episode, we watched Shigaraki working to step into leadership by proving himself worthy for greater power, by facing a loyal only to All For One beast, Gigantomachia. It explains where the Villain League has been and how they've grown stronger, but I don't really care for an episode dedicated solely to that, and not a whole lot happens. Episode 109, Revival Party. D tier. The League of Villains faces the Meta Liberation Army, fighting as they wait for Gigantomachia to arrive. While I don't really like the journalistic aspect of Toga's foe, or Toga's attitude generally, or how her backstory is supposed to make me empathize with her. I get that she's influenced by her quirk to love blood, but when that makes you a murderer, my concern is to make sure that you're not going to bite my or someone else's neck and drink my or their blood. Also, there are a lot of mid-battle flashbacks, and we suddenly see her quirk do something that it hasn't been able to do before. Give her access to people's quirks, not just their looks. Sudden, unexplainable quirk development that is only there to make the villains more intimidating. There are some similarities between One for All and this, but, as mentioned in my last video, I think the story did far better with Izuku, making development slow and explained. Episode 110, Sad Man's Parade, D tier. Twice, seeing Toga's life in danger, splits, duplicating himself into an army, and makes a realization about his past. Specifically, when his arms are broken, learning that he is not a duplicate, that allows him to overcome his past, and with it the self-imposed restraints on his quirk. Some of the perspectives in this episode are interesting. The argument for less regulated quirk use, where the powerful, using their quirks to the fullest, are able to do what they want, including, for example, Toga simply capturing, torturing, and killing people simply because she loves their blood. Twice's development was more earned than Toga's, but following hers, it's clear that this is just the villains get stronger arc, designed to make every one of the hero's enemies stronger. It's better development, but it can't be disconnected from the arc. Episode 111, Tenko Shimura, Origin, F tier. As Shigaraki and the League of Villains face the final battling members of the Meta Liberation Army, Shigaraki looks back on his past. It's nice to see the one part of this arc that relied on strategy in the slightest, as Gigantamakia rushes into the fray, looking to defeat Shigaraki, but destroying anything in his path. The comment that meta abilities or quirks have a direct connection to the personality is something that actually should be explored more, not just thrown in and expected to justify the actions of the villains. Also, Shigaraki's quirk changes. Now he doesn't need to touch his opponents with all 5 fingers for reasons. Growing stronger, I understand, but changing the established rules of specific quirks without any justification, I don't. And to randomly add in the concept of an awakening in this episode just shows to me that it is known that the changes need justifications, but it feels like an ex post facto justification. And seeing Shimura's son resentful that he was abandoned as she took up One for All and entered the war against All for One makes sense. Seeing Shigaraki's desire for death and destruction doesn't really. Episode 112, Tomura Shigaraki, Origin, F tier. Shigaraki realizes the destroy that destruction brings him as he defeats the Meta Liberation Army, and through his display of absolute freedom, unites both groups, standing as the leader of both. I just don't love the exploration of the mind of psychopaths, for the lack of a better word, that make up the League of Villains. I get that they had a rough life, but plenty of people have rough lives and don't end up being murderers. In a philosophical sense, I want everyone to be happy, but I'm not willing to let society crumble for another's pleasure. I also hate the suggestion made that a single person reaching out to help could have stopped Shigaraki, especially when we see that someone did and was put off by the psychopathic look on his face. And when a single touch of your hand could disintegrate them, I don't entirely blame them. Episode 113, The High, Deep Blue Sky, C tier. The heroes and villains prepare for the coming confrontation as Class 1A finishes their first year of high school. I liked it. I thought it was good, but at the same time, almost nothing happens. It shows Class 1A's growth, which was much more believable than that of the villains, mostly teamwork and minor improvements on quirks, which is different than changing what the quirk can do. OVA 1, HLB, B tier. The students who are interned with the heroes who participate recreationally in Hero League Baseball play alongside their mentors in a tiebreaker match, where everyone gives their all, and maybe a bit too much. This episode is a stupid kind of fun that I think works really well as an OVA. I love the super-powered sport and the over-the-top intensity of the 2 team captains, and watching characters get absolutely demolished by applying anime strength to a normal sport was fun to watch. Ultimately, it's pointless, but this episode recognized that and had fun with itself. OVA 2, Laugh, As If You Are in Hell, C tier. A vandal with the ability to make people laugh when they see his face is spreading graffiti all over the city. Can the heroes stop him? The idea that a low-level vandal is strong enough to bring the number 1 hero's agency to the job is somewhat funny, as is having Endeavor hesitant to accept the job until his own house is vandalized. The biggest problem that I have is that it has one joke that is way overused. But having the heroes get invested in something so silly is kind of dumb. Enjoyable, but dumb. In other words, not as good as the other OVA this season, but still a fun break. This season was somewhat bipolar, having some great moments and a lot of misses. The biggest demerit was the My Villain Academia arc. I'm sure there's a way I could have liked it, and I'll touch more on some points in my conclusion. In the end, I loved a lot of this season, but also found a lot of it repetitive and unimportant, and a few episodes of it bad. Episode 114, A Quiet Beginning, A tier. The students and heroes all gather together, using the information gathered by Hawks, to attack the Paranormal Liberation Front, the united forces of the League of Villains and the Meta Liberation Army, as well as a hidden lab underneath a hospital. This is a very solid start to a season. I love how the heroes and Endeavor are intimidating and gathered in such large numbers. It's perfect. Right here, right now, it feels like nothing can stop them. Being an opening, it isn't super flashy. But the plan is made clear, and we're thrown right into the action, if not the fight. Episode 115, Mirko, the number 5 hero, A tier. The attack continues against the hospital, underneath which a villainous mad scientist hides, and Mirko is confronted by 5 high-end Nomus. The attack on the Paranormal Liberation Front headquarters begins as well. I liked Mirko and her clear skill, and the beginning of the attacks on the headquarters is nice. But the episode had one serious hiccup when Javlv was told not to think about protecting someone somewhere, but to think of someone close to him, and immediately thinking of Earphone Jack. That moment was fantastic. It was a sweet moment that was honestly fantastic, but then it was instantly ruined when it immediately thereafter repeats the line, emphasizing it with a flashback. I only need to hear a line once, and saying it twice really knocks me out of the moment. Episode 116, One's Justice, S tier. Panic erupts in the Paranormal Liberation Front headquarters, and Hawks confronts and traps Twice. Twice asks Hawks about this betrayal. This episode sets up a threat that is executed later on very well, but the reason that this is an S tier is the clash between Hawks and Twice. Both of their beliefs are clear, as are their motivations, and while I think Twice's loyalty to the League of Villains is foolish, I understand it, as well as such dedication leaves Hawks no choice but to ultimately kill Twice, for the immense and immediate threat that he poses to the heroes and, by extension, society. I guess what I'm saying is I understand why sometimes someone needs to die, especially when they have a superpower that can single-handedly turn the tide of a battle on which society as a whole depends. I appreciate that Hawks gave Twice the chance to make another choice. He didn't want to kill him, but rather than letting him destroy everything, did. The one thing that I find ironic is that Twice says that everyone always abandons the down and out. And he says this as Hawks is actively trying to help him. But I also understand how, especially in the moment, his mind wouldn't see anything more than the betrayal. Also, it's interesting to see the first bit of the darker side of the society that we've been watching. Not just the public face, but a secret agency that kills criminals silently, without trial, to maintain the feeling of peace and safety. Episode 117, Inheritance, B tier. Hawks, threatened by Dobby's intense blue flames, strong enough to burn his feathers away, remembers his past. Mirko battles against the high-end Nomus to prevent Shigaraki's awakening. Hawks, having told Tokoyami that his weakness is fire, is a great justification to have Tokoyami worry and change course to protect him. I also like Mirko's determination, no matter the physical cost. There is a lot of exposition in this episode, from Hawks' past to the true nature of the villain's plan. Shigaraki inheriting all for one. It is new and nice to learn, but it is a lot. The loose spark waking Shigaraki from his coma is frightening, and well enough set up that I'm fine with it. Episode 118, The Thrill of Destruction, B tier. Shigaraki awakens, with all the powers of All for One ingrained in him. Can the heroes stop such an immense power? This episode is good, but the decay that occurs when Shigaraki emerges takes about 5 minutes of the episode, and I got the gist in about 5 seconds. Maybe making it 1 minute instead of 5 would have been enough. Despite the fact that it was a mass tragedy and serious destruction, it just took longer than it retained my interest. There's only so many ways to see the ground crumble. Shigaraki's power increase is ridiculous, clear, and intimidating. But somehow, even with Shigaraki's awakening, Gigantomachia's rise, and Dobby beginning to battle seriously, as well as Hawks being rescued, it still felt like it was mostly building up to the next episodes. Episode 119, Encounter, Part 2. Another B tier. As the hero's seeming dominance is turned on its head, Midoriya realizes that he, and his quirk One for All, are Shigaraki's target. The setup for what's coming is nice, even if Shigaraki's power levels are so extreme as to be hard to believe. I appreciated Izuku and Bakugo's cockiness being knocked down a peg, as they are saved by Gran Torino, and it becomes clear that Izuku's original plan to evade Shigaraki alone simply won't work. Shigaraki being able to take on Endeavor, even as he's rendered unable to use quirks by Eraserhead, is genuinely frightening, if on reflection, as mentioned, a little hard to believe. And the rise of a bunch of Nomus at the end is confusing. I don't entirely understand where they all were just prior to this, or how they survived, or anything like that, but ultimately it's still fine. Episode 120, Disaster Walker, B tier. Endeavor battles Shigaraki as another threat. Gigantomachia rushes across Japan, destroying everything in his wake. Seeing Bakugo, Izuku, and Endeavor's teamwork is really nice. At this point in the show, the villains are so strong, it's a little bit hard to believe, Shigaraki and Gigantomachia specifically. And seeing so many powerful heroes trampled over like it's nothing is kind of crazy. Episode 121, League of Villains vs. UA Students, A tier. A group of UA students, being right beside Gigantomachia, determined to stop him right here and now. They strategize, set traps, and manage, barely, to get a large dose of anesthetic into his mouth. At that moment, he transforms, as he is determined not to be distracted by such pests, and continues on. Shigaraki, on the verge of defeat, throws a delete around, stolen from the Shihasakai, at Eraserhead. I liked the strategy to take down Gigantomachia, as well as the difficulty of execution, with a last-ditch effort of determination and iron will, just barely getting them across the finish line. The transformation immediately after seemed a little convenient. Why hadn't Gigantomachia simply transformed before? Shigaraki's strategy as he's being beat down makes a lot of sense, and having seen the next episode previously, I find the solution believable and set up well. As happens somewhat frequently, there are a few too many flashbacks, but ultimately still a good episode. Episode 122, Katsuki Bakugo Rising, S tier, Eraserhead. Reacts quickly to the delete around, cutting off his leg before his quirk is deleted. However, for just a moment he blinked, pausing. For just a moment his quirk erasure, and Shigaraki heals. Midoriya rushes in and faces him head-on. This episode is peak, even with a couple moments, specifically Minoru questioning everything and why they did anything at all. The sheer amount of destruction Gigantomachia causes is crazy. Hearing the list of cities that will be annihilated as he runs through Japan is crazy. And the students feeling defeated by Gigantomachia makes sense, even if Minoru's questioning of everything ever doesn't. I liked Izuku noticing that Shigaraki was unprepared for his quirk, as he was in the beginning. And as happens occasionally, I actually appreciated the use of flashbacks here, showing us Izuku's growth and Bakugo's story, as he had his hero moment with Izuku, as Izuku did with him in the second episode. In this context, the flashbacks add to the story, show growth, and aren't just a simple reminder that X happened. I liked seeing that Bakugo was genuinely worried about Izuku's complete and total selflessness. Izuku's willingness to give all of himself, his life included, actively demonstrated as he repeatedly breaks his arm using One for All at 100% to protect anyone and everyone. Episode 123, The Ones Within Us, C tier. Izuku and Shigaraki are brought to an otherworldly internal land of their quirks, when Shigaraki attempts to steal One for All. Izuku sees All for One working behind the scene to lead, even control Shigaraki. He sees the conflict within All for One. Gigantomachia continues to rush to his master, Shigaraki. It's quite a lot of exposition, and it's a little convenient that One for All can't simply just be stolen, but it makes some sense and allows for some unusual exposition and explanation to be justified. As usual, Toga's worldview is very strange, and I often don't fully understand her. Episode 124, Dabi's Dance, A tier. Toga feels betrayed by Uraraka as they battle. And as Gigantomachia reaches Shigaraki, Dabi makes his big announcement to the world. He is Toya Todoroki, abused by his father Endeavor, whose power lust scarred the Todoroki family. I really liked how the seeds of conflict began between Shigaraki and All for One's will. I also thought Toga and Uraraka talking past each other made sense with how different their worldviews are. I also thought Dabi turning the war into one of information, using his perspective on the truth to destroy his father's legacy, made sense, as did Endeavor's collapse at the thought that his greatest regret in life, his dead son, was still alive, and that he couldn't change anything. And having Shoto step in to protect Endeavor from Dabi's attacks made sense. Best Jeanist showing up at the last moment of this episode was okay, but it would have been better if there had been some sort of setup and not such a sudden arrival. Episode 125, Threads of Hope, A tier. Best Jeanist arrives on the scene as the heroes near their last straw. Mirio, his quirk having been restored by Eri, also joins the battle. The villains seem to be on their last legs as the battle nears its end. It's a little convenient to have Gigantomachia pass out suddenly from the buildup of everything. It makes sense that he'd be drained, but the suddenness of it is hard to buy. I really appreciated the determination of the heroes and find that it's a decent justification, as well as the addition of a few fresh heroes, for it feeling like the heroes have regained the upper hand. Mario's return is fantastic, even if it feels a little convenient. Not clearly set up besides the general idea that Eri could restore the quirk. Episode 126. Final Performance. Another A tier. The high-stakes battle concludes as the villains flee, evading capture, and the heroes, severely injured, many dead, and countless civilian casualties and buildings destroyed. It's a really good close to the arc. A victory that feels like defeat. One where it really feels like both sides lost. It uses too many flashbacks, but it didn't take away too much from the episode. I also liked Compress's fight back at any cost to himself. I am always impressed by Izuku's desire to save Shigaraki after catching, at the center of his heart, a glimpse of a trapped child in need of rescue. I certainly am not, and don't know of anyone who is just genuinely that worried for others. Episode 127. Hellish Hell. F tier. As the heroes recover after the battle against the Paranormal Liberation Front, public backlash erupts at the mass casualties, loss of heroes, and the truth about Endeavor. I don't need a recap episode 1 week later. I also find the public to be quite annoying. I understand the impulse to distrust the heroes when something so terrible came as the end product, but it's also clearly blaming the wrong people. Not the villains whose express goal under Shigaraki's leadership is to destroy everything, but the heroes who fought back against it. A complicating factor is Endeavor's past being revealed, but it doesn't feel like enough to lead to the backlash it did. The biggest problem, though, is the first one. I just don't need a recap of what happened a week ago. Episode 128. Tartarus. D tier. Under All For One's control, Shigaraki raids the high-security prison, Tartarus, with a group of Nomus and sets All For One free. This and other high-security prisons are overcome, the criminals within are set free to cause chaos, and the tottering trust in heroes collapses and crumbles. I like what it's setting up, including All For One's intent to take control over Shigaraki's body, and am able to feel some sympathy for Shigaraki, seeing how All For One simply sees him as a pawn in a game. Episode 129. The Hellish Todoroki Family, Part 2. B tier. With the heroes who participated in the raid still in the hospital, the heroes on the street face the collapsing world and an angry public, ready to take justice into their own hands. Many heroes reconsider what it is to be a hero and bow out. Hawks reflects on his past, the deeds he did for the Security Commission to maintain the image of peace. I think this episode does a really good job at telling us what's going on and what led up to it without repeating things shown before. I think the parallels between the vigilante justice and the Paranormal Liberation Front are somewhat interesting to consider, if maybe slightly overblown. Still, at the end of the day, it is just build-up, but very well executed build-up. Episode 130. The Wrong Way to Put Out a Fire. B tier. Endeavor and his family speak about Toya Dabi's death and their scarred past. Hawks and Best Genus propose a plan to Endeavor. I really liked the addition of Toya into the Todoroki family narrative, and how everyone takes responsibility for the way things went. There were times that the story's telling, not the events, but the family repeating them, felt a little bit forced, but I appreciate how much I can understand everyone's decisions, even when they were wrong. And I thought the hero's questions about One For All made sense. Episode 131. Izuku Midoriya and Tomura Shigaraki. C tier. Izuku talks with the previous One For All wielders and is asked if he can kill Shigaraki. The top three heroes face head-on the souring public sentiment. There's too much exposition for this episode to be great, though I appreciate what is learned from it. Even if it wasn't ex post facto, the justification of One For All only being safe to pass down to someone who is quirkless feels ex post facto, something designed just to justify Izuku being chosen. I don't know necessarily that it was, but it certainly feels like it. I also liked the subtle callback, very different from a flashback, to Ochako asking who it is that protects the protectors, and the press conference is fine. Episode 132. Full Power. B tier. Izuku, having gone rogue to fight crime with some of the top heroes and left UA to protect the other students there, faces villains in the streets, working desperately to protect everyone he can in this now upside-down world. I really liked seeing how much Izuku has changed, and the situation that he's in. Even if the growth is sudden, though the suddenness is somewhat justified by having the previous All For One wielders as mentors, It's a bit of an anime trope to have a previous villain barely defeated in an instant by the protagonist. But it was pretty effective here, though I guess it forces a question of if Izuku could do it alone by having someone else weaken him. I guess I just wonder, if the point of the villain returning was to show how much Izuku had grown, why add a variable that makes it anything but absolutely definitive? Episode 133, Hired Gun, B tier. The top heroes continue to face criticism as they give their all to recapture the jailbreakers and look for hints about Shigaraki's location. Suddenly, Izuku is attacked by a criminal from Tartarus, Lady Nagant. There were a lot of flashbacks and internal dialogue within Izuku's mind, or quirk, all for one, but the way that they were used in conversation wasn't terrible. I enjoyed seeing Izuku's ideology of protecting others pushed to its absolute edge. I also liked the introduction of Lady Nagant, including how All for One uses her, and gave her a second quirk. I mentioned it before, but I don't understand how the public hates the heroes as much as they do. I understand wanting to protect themselves, but it goes beyond that here. Episode 134, The Lovely Lady Nagant, S tier. Izuku faces Lady Nagant, who tells him of the dark underside of the world of heroes, a government agency of heroes who mercilessly kill criminals. All Might and the pro-heroes rush to save Izuku. I liked Izuku's strategy and hearing of the dark secret underbelly of the previous society. There was a little too much mid-battle exposition, a flashback to the same episode, and a strange equalization of the heroes' world and the villains, though I can see how Lady Nagant would be scarred enough to view it that way. But I still really liked it. Episode 135, Friend, A tier. As Izuku's strength wears thin, being on duty and under threat 100% of the time, Class 1A realizes something is off with Izuku, and they try to find a way to help him. Again, in this episode, there were a lot of flashbacks. I liked the continuation of this arc pushing Izuku's ideology to its limits, seeing him barely able to stand as he fights valiantly to protect anyone and everyone from anything and everything. I even liked Class 1A showing up in the nick of time to save Izuku from the mob. I find the conflict between Izuku and Class 1A interesting. He left to protect them from the threat that the target on his back poses, and they're here to bring him back. Protect him from the threat that living outside in this crime-ridden world poses. Episode 136, Deku vs. Class A, S tier. Izuku, in his desperate attempt to protect Class 1A from the threats he faces, the giant target on his back, tries to fight his way past them to escape. This episode is fantastic. The stakes are high and everyone gives their all. It's a great step in Uraraka's question of who protects the protectors. It's largely a flashback and exposition battle, and yet it's exactly what it needs to be. It demonstrates Izuku's insane power believably. It gives just about every student a moment to shine, and adds something to the ideological clash of how best to protect the other. Ida's use of Izuku's line from the second season, that it's a hero's job to interfere in the lives of others, was great. Bakugo's monologue to Izuku genuinely brought a tear to my eye, and also made sense of Bakugo's hatred of Izuku early on. And the cliffhanger protesters within the UA barrier made sense and set up the next episode perfectly. Episode 137, A Young Woman's Declaration, S tier. Ochako, putting herself before the protesting refugees, pleads for Izuku to be accepted, granted a place to rest within UA's protective barriers. Hearing her plea, multiple people who have themselves been saved by Izuku, especially Kota, step up and add their voices to hers. It was a beautiful mirror to the previous episode, but there were a few, to continue the analogy, scratches. I loved seeing the people put their all on the line to protect Izuku from the cruel world, but the heckling crowd and mid-speech exposition detracted somewhat from the episode. I also felt like the shift of the statement, "This is my journey to become the number one hero," to "This is our journey to become the number one hero," was too forced for the poetics of it. I mean, it makes sense that it's not a one-man show, but also, Izuku with his power and role in the story is the number one hero here. As a side note, how advanced the UA security is, it's a little hard to believe. Episode 138, No Man is an Island, C tier. All Might is confronted by Stain, who reminds All Might of who All Might is, with or without powers, and the impact that he's had. He also leaks information on Shigaraki and All for One, when Shigaraki will be ready for a full-on assault. But I don't feel strongly about this episode. I liked Stain acting as an information leak, and it was kind of funny seeing the other students talking. And it was kind of funny seeing the other students taking care of Izuku. It also sets the stakes for the coming season well, and gave us a good introduction to Star and Stripe. EOVA, UA Heroes Battle. C tier. Stuck at UA for winter break, the students play a card game, pitting each other's quirks and personalities against each other in digital, hypothetical battles. It's somewhat funny, but that's about it. It was a lot of slop with goofy animation, and AI that makes funny decisions like All Might's card not winning because he leaves the battlefield to save a dog. And also quite funny to hear that card games got banned in the dorm because of this game. It cracked a smile on my face. This season was grand and ambitious, and it stuck the landing. I guess one way to put it is that this season is the first that the conflict isn't an attack on a school or a villain in the streets like Stain, or even a drug bust, the quirk boosting kind of drug, but a war. It may be a negligible difference to some, seeing how similar the end product is. Still a multi-conflict fight, but the fact that it pulls off such a grand conflict speaks to me. I also enjoyed Izuku's rogue arc, and seeing his growth, and seeing him saved from himself by the students. A very, very solid season indeed. Episode 139. In the Nick of Time. A big time maverick from the West. A tier. As world leaders hesitate in sending assistance to Japan, worried about what might be done to them if they do, Star and Stripe, America's #1 hero, flies herself and her team of fighter pilots out to Japan to help. She finds Shigaraki in the middle of her flight path and begins fighting. It was, to some degree, a recap opening, but as an opening it makes sense and wasn't bad. This episode also emphasizes the heteromorphs mistreatment more than it ever has been before in the show, though I guess there was some setup. The possession and conflict and unison, somehow truly all of those at once in the mind of Shigaraki, is well done. Star and Stripe's quirk is really cool, even if the rules and explanations aren't the most fun to watch. Episode 140, Spectre, A tier. Star and Stripe valiantly challenges Shigaraki with her team, but through quick moves and the immense power of All for One, Shigaraki defeats Star and Stripe and steals her quirk. A battle erupts within Shigaraki, however. New Order, Star and Stripe's quirk, has been given a rule: to oppose all other quirks, and within Shigaraki was destroying all the quirks that had been stolen from others. The heroes now have a precious days longer to prepare. I guess one of the problems I have with the complicated quirk is that it needs to be explained a lot, and there was a lot in both this and the last episode. The fight is a little bit explainy, having each step in the battle explained by internal monologue, hypothesized by the enemy, and then verbally confirmed. But it does also somewhat justify Shigaraki's survival, which I appreciate was due to quick wit, and not just, oh, he's strong. And I liked that Star and Stripe came to realize that she would lose and set the trap of quirk civil war for Shigaraki. Though a little bit more of a hint, even Shigaraki just seeing her mouth mutter something unheard would have been nice. Episode 141, Villain, C tier. As Shigaraki and All for One recover after being devastated by Star and Stripe, UA faces the fact that there's a traitor among them. Yuga Aoyama is a pawn of All for One. I didn't really like how much the opening sequence set up Invisible Girl as the traitor, just as a way to subvert expectations later on. But overall it wasn't bad, it was just very plot and explanation heavy. Why Aoyama isn't removed from the equation by All for One, why the family did what All for One asked, how the students want to use this as an opportunity, and on and on. I like what's being revealed, it's just a lot. Episode 142, the story of how we all became heroes. B tier. Eraserhead comes up with a plan to use Aoyama's role as a pawn to their own benefit. The plan is very mysterious at this point, which I don't mind, and wish the show applied elsewhere at times. I need to know the plan eventually, not always at the start though. I also don't need flashbacks to something that happened this episode. I am in fact watching the show, and can see what happened. But still, this episode was good. Episode 143, Let You Down, A tier. The heroes and villains prepare for the coming battle. Izuku and Ochako talk about the pain they've seen in the villain's eyes. And Aoyama betrays All for One using Izuku as bait, and the final battle begins. Again, largely build up for what's coming, and it tries really hard to get you to emphasize with, bad people. And while I can say their treatment wasn't quote-unquote right, in that there were certainly people who were very mean to them, but I also think that unless their actions are different, polite society, for the lack of a better term, isn't right for them. And I guess the show is really good at showing that people were mean to them, and that the villains are scarred people, but not at what to do with a person whose quirk leads them to want to drink blood. On the story side, I think that Toga having twice his blood was new information that was believable, and good setup for what's coming next, even if it might have been nice to show something at the time. Episode 144. Division. A tier. The final battle bursts forth as the heroes blast onto the scene. Their plan to split the villains and heroes into smaller, distant battles works flawlessly, except that Izuku, the key player, is pulled by Toga through a portal to a distant island. Nevertheless, the final war begins. It is fun to see the complete plan and execution. It's a little hard to believe because it's so complex and things need to go very right, but it's also fun to see. And there's a lot that's been set up paying off here. It's interesting having Shigaraki have a quirk, innate trait, that allows him to pretty much bypass Eraserhead's erasure and still know that it would somehow be worse if Eraserhead wasn't using it. Episode 145. Inflation. C tier. With Shigaraki still able to use a strange power, and Izuku far from where he needs to be, the heroes in the coffin in the sky, their manufactured battlefield for use against Shigaraki, are at a severe disadvantage. They fight back, trying to hold out until Izuku arrives. It's weird seeing Toga tell Izuku that she has a crush on him, and the fight to allow Izuku to escape wasn't my favorite. There were 2 flashbacks in the same conversation to events that had occurred only 2 episodes ago, within 5 minutes, and the battle with Dabi is just an exposition dump at this point, not a fight at all. But overall, not terrible. Episode 146. 2 flash fires. A tier. Shoto faces Dabi as he reveals his desire to tear down Endeavor. Shoto reveals his ultimate move, a perfect balance of hot and cold. It is a great conflict, but overwhelming amounts of exposition and flashback. Not bad here, just overwhelming. I also thought that Shoto's use of fire to free his ice is both a perfect form of rebellion and something that shows his growth. Not just that he doesn't use flame like in the second season, but not being exactly who Endeavor had originally created him to be. Episode 147. Extras. A tier. News of Shoto's victory bolsters the spirits of the other heroes. Endeavor battles against All for One. The dialogue was a little on the nose and there are too many flashbacks, but I felt the motivation spread. And the battle between Endeavor, Hawks, and All for One is fantastic. Especially seeing how well the Master Planner is able to use Endeavor's weakness, being haunted by his past, perfectly, and quickly gaining the upper hand. The addition of the students to the battle was also great, even, and maybe especially, seeing that the heroes are still outmatched. Episode 148. Wounded Hero, Burning Bright and True. A tier. Endeavor has fallen and Hawk, Tokoyami, and Jiro are all injured, almost defeated. Jiro steps up to the hero plate, giving Endeavor just enough time, using his flames, to seal the wound on his body and charge back in. As much as I like this episode, it was held back by All for One's quirk's rebellion inside of him. Like, what? I guess it gives a weak character like Jiro a chance, but such a conveniently timed weakness that has no justification, it just happens, is weak writing. I really liked Endeavor though, and the use of the quirk erasure drugs designed from Ares' quirk as a way to reverse time on All for One was also really nice. It was a great ace up the sleeve. Shigaraki's statement that when there's too big of a disparity, it breeds misunderstanding. Misunderstanding breeds fear and rejection is somewhat questionable, and I like Bakugo's reply that he's seen all that, but everyone's trying to move forwards despite it, and not tearing down everything like the villains are. Bakugo's super attack was really cool, and it's frightening to see it do practically nothing, and hear that the only reason Shigaraki is remotely interested in Bakugo is that he's the one closest to Izuku, and therefore one for all. Episode 149. Light fades to rain. S tier. The big 3 step up to defend Bakugo, severely injured from Shigaraki. Seeing Shigaraki's morphed arm turn into a mouth and spit out poison from Tamiki's scorpion attack, Mirio's strength and abilities, sliding in and rescuing Bakugo, Bakugo's tear-filled eyes is still examining the fight in order to step back in, better than before, Shigaraki's childish response to Mirio saying that he doesn't have any friends, and Tamiki's powerful backup plan, and Shigaraki surviving everything so easily, leading to Bakugo rushing in again and empathizing with Izuku as every move hurt, and him being hit and collapsing, laying tragically. All of it was beautiful. It was a great episode. Its beauty is somewhat undermined by the following episodes, but here and now, it is beautiful. Episode 150. Those Who Defend, Those Who Violate. B tier. Bakugo is in critical condition, and Shigaraki and All for One both still standing, powerful compared to the weakening heroes. Dabi, not quite defeated, threatens to burn everyone and everything around him to a crisp in a suicidal attack. But the heroes won't give up. In the coffin in the sky, Izuku arrives at last and sees Bakugo's beaten body. I wasn't passionate about this episode. Izuku's been traveling for 5 episodes, though the events of these episodes are happening simultaneously for the story, and is just arriving. I don't understand why the Doomsday theory is brought up quite as much as it is, and I don't understand exactly how Edgeshot saves Bakugo's life, or why it will take his away, but like that, at least in theory, the lives are traded, and not simply saved, and death means something. In theory, and yes, I know I've repeated myself. Episode 151. A chain of events across the ages. A tier. Izuku arrives and begins his battle with Shigaraki. Can he defeat All for One? Can he defeat All for One while also saving Shigaraki? The use of Star and Stripes fighter plane team to speed up Izuku was kind of cool, while Mirio stepping in to calm Izuku down felt a little weird, but the message that heroes are working to make the ideal a reality was quite good. If you don't beat him in 5 minutes, the world will lose, is a bold statement, especially when followed by Shigaraki saying that he hasn't had a chance to show his true power yet. Hint hint, nudge nudge, foreshadowing. Episode 152. Together with Shoji. D tier. Spinner leads the heteromorphs on an attack on Central Hospital to bring Kurogiri back. Shoji, also a heteromorph, appeals to the mob's humanity. Don't let the villains use injustice for their gain. I don't really like this episode, in part because while I could see a world in which the heteromorph concept works, it throws so much new stuff into the story, it feels forcefully created to make a real-world point. And it's the forcefully created part that I have a problem with. The mob doesn't make a ton of sense, especially the way that they keep pausing and resuming. The almost static riot scenes weren't great either, and Koji has sudden unearned power growth. I did like Shoji in this, and his line that while he can't change the world in a single generation, he'll stand a light on top of history and advance it however much he can, was great. Episode 153. Butterfly Effect. B tier. Spinner reaches Kurogiri alone. The rest of the mob unwilling to continue fighting when they see the hospital staff standing in their path. Toga, fighting Ochako and the others, uses her secret weapon, twice his blood and quirk. I liked the line that Kurogiri's quirk will decide this fight, and seeing how drastically it turns the already diminishing odds against the hero. As a side note, I didn't like how the last episode was just for dramatic tension, created the way it was just to have it lead to pretty much nothing. It just makes it feel like I'm being lied to. Episode 154. The Chain Thus Far. S tier. Toga, using twice his quirk, and Dabi are both transported to All for One's battlefield, turning the already low odds further against the heroes. Some of Twice's clones also appear in the coffin in the sky. Their attack causing Eraserhead and Monoma to blink. Todoroki is given just enough time to recover, but former criminals, Gentle Criminal, La Brava, and Lady Nagant all throw their support behind the heroes. I really liked seeing people given a proper second chance here, even if this episode was full of exposition. I liked the rising stakes and direct face-offs between Ochako and Toga, and Endeavor and Dabi. Episode 155. Hopes. A tier. Given a moment to respond to Shigaraki's reawakening by Lady Nagant and La Brava and Gentle Criminal, Izuku knocks Shigaraki from the coffin in the sky, using all his power to restrain Shigaraki's hand. All for One displays his immense power, but the pro-heroes and Tokoyami stand, willing to fight until the end. And the students from Shiketsu High School arrive to support them. Kurogiri's battle of identity was set up and is pretty good, but it's a little hard to say exactly how it works, and Shiketsu High School's arrival was a little bit too perfectly timed, but not ruinous. Maybe the thing I liked most was Gentle Criminal finally doing something for something other than attention, which, ironically, is recorded. Episode 156. It's a Small World. A tier. All for One gets younger and continually stronger. So even with backup, the heroes don't seem to stand a chance. Until Gigantomachia arrives. Gigantomachia, feeling he's been used as a pawn, turns against All for One. The fight by the villains to awake Gigantomachia was good, and having it turn out to be a gain for the heroes was interesting. It didn't entirely make sense to have Gigantomachia, previously portrayed as a mindless beast, suddenly turn on All for One, but it works well enough. Also, it makes no sense to me to have All for One explicitly state that Todoroki's quirk was so good that he needed to add it to his collection, and then doing nothing about it when Todoroki was lying there helpless. Episode 157, I Am Here, S tier. All for One rushes to unite with Shigaraki before his de-aging body disappears. All Might stands, armored, ready for the final battle with All for One. Dabi, driven onward only by the ever-growing flame of resentment, prepares to explode, burning himself, Endeavor, and anything in the vicinity to a crisp. Shoto and the other Todoroki family members arrive, contributing their cooling ice to stop him from killing bystanders. All Might detracts somewhat from this one. The mechanical suit doesn't really make sense to me, but it's fine. The Todoroki family's conclusion, however, including Dabi's realization that it wasn't revenge he sought, but feeling like he was part of the family, was beautiful. Also, seeing Endeavor cry as he rushed to his son's side was a beautiful moment. Episode 158, A Girl's Ego, B tier. Otako battles through an army of Twices to reach Toga and talk about love with her. As her quirk evolves past the zero gravity of what she's able to touch, to the zero gravity being able to be passed through and influence other objects as well, she, amidst a sky of Twices, reaches Toga, who attacks her. Otako, as she offers Toga her blood, and Toga's heart melts, hears Toga's perspective. It was full of complicated, beautiful moments mixed with empathy so strong I can't empathize with it. Also, the rules for Otako's quirk suddenly shift without an explanation, except quirk singularity theory. The theory that quirks are growing stronger over generations and will eventually end the world. Not that individual quirks can change. Also, it flashes back to events of this episode. Why? No reason. And Otako's offering of her blood is a little off-putting. Like, what's the limiting principle there? And the episode uses too many switches to child form, which I get is saying that everyone's just a harmed child, but it's distracting. One thing that I really liked was Sue's development, to seeing that being a hero isn't always about following the rules. One thing I should note after listing all the negatives, which are usually more notable than the successes, is that it is still a B tier. It's just complicated. Episode 159, Battle Without a Quirk, B tier. Toga, smiling back, gives the profusely bleeding Otako her blood to save her life. The powerless All Might stands firm in a technological supersuit, in a final stand against All for One. I liked how poetic this episode was at parts, but also feel like Toga is almost without a cause injured, just enough that she'll die, and so she'll give her life to help Otako survive. The same way that Twice saved her earlier on. It also repeats the "if only I'd known X, I'd have behaved differently" line, done with Dabi last. And I just wish that I knew what in their life would have led to that. Not having parents and teachers treat her like a monster, though that likely began after a long time of trying to prepare her for polite society. But when you kill a kid, suck his blood, and don't see anything wrong with it, I don't know what will change your mind. Armored All Might is almost cool, but it's beyond believability enough that the coolness is diminished. But I liked that the suit is equipped with things mirroring Class 1A's quirks, and that All Might learned from everyone, not just taught them. With only one D tier and no F tier episodes, it's by no means bad. But a lot of the even S tier episodes had factors that complicated the ranking. The action is exciting, and a lot of things set up for many seasons are reaching beautiful conclusions. But more often than elsewhere, the characters' powers feel fake, and having what, in the story's world, is a few minutes, take an entire season, and having the same fight continue into the next, makes parts, like Izuku's traveling from the island to the coffin in the sky, feel like they take forever. At the end of the day, though, it is a solid, action-packed season. Episode 160, Toshinori Yagi Rising / Origin, C tier. All Might and All for One face in their tensest battle yet. All Might gives it his all and manages to greatly reduce All for One's quickly diminishing time. But each reduction in time makes him more powerful. When all seems lost, Stain enters the fray beside his hero, All Might, and freezes All for One, giving All Might a chance. I thought it was really interesting to see the events of last season at real speed, which is ironically, I think, much faster than real speed would be. But seeing how much happened so quickly was interesting. Much of the first half of this episode is a complete repeat of the last half of the last episode, which, why? I understand recap, but not exact repeat. Seeing Invisible Girl didn't make sense to me, but her and Aoyama's fight against the villain was clever, if not anything special. I also liked All Might's strategy and thought the twist of Stain stepping in was pretty awesome. Episode 161, The End of an Era and the Beginning. C tier. Stain is quickly defeated, and All Might is rendered powerless before All for One. As All for One prepares to rip All Might in half, Bakugo, up in the coffin in the sky, stands again. It felt like not a lot happened in this episode. There were some cool moments, but really it's just building to the next episode. And Izuku and Shigaraki being in a motionless stalemate after watching for most of the last season, Izuku traveling to the fight. It's not exciting and doesn't really make sense to me. Why can't Shigaraki just use one of his quirks to break free? Why can't he use his non-quirk transformation to break free? Just both in an unmoving struggle? Sure, I guess. Episode 162, The Final Boss. B tier. The revived Bakugo bursts his way back into the fight, saving All Might and facing All for One himself, no matter his personal condition. There were a few things that didn't make sense. Rainbow-colored bursts with Bakugo's power or it causing sparkling all around him. Bakugo's pain seemed fake. He's barely alive. And laughing? A wounded soldier can fight, but not effortlessly crash through buildings. I also don't understand why Edgeshot is alive in a partial string. I understand that there was some sacrifice, but it doesn't entirely make sense. I also, and perhaps biggest of all, don't understand why you have a person who can see into the future, like Night Eye, just to have their predictions be wrong. It just makes his power feel fake to have it twisted by people, quote-unquote, believing in something. I still liked this episode and its twist on the title, having the final boss be something Bakugo calls himself, and not actually All for One. Episode 163. Quirk. Explosion. B tier. All for One remembers his past and the history of One for All as he is defeated by his rapidly rewinding life and Bakugo's incredible fighting. Bakugo's fighting is a little weird here. Isn't it supposed to just be his sweat exploding? He's so strong here, able to defeat All for One that it's hard to believe, especially with how mobile he is despite being supposedly severely injured. The history of All for One's youth was nice, but it seems to skip over a key rule of the quirk One for All, that it is transferred by consuming DNA that is willingly given with the intent of passing the quirk. Like, how was that fact learned? Why does it seem like no one else had to do it that way? Was it just a joke at the beginning of the show that was completely forgotten about? No answer. It was still pretty good. There are just a few things that don't fit perfectly. Episode 164. History's Greatest Villain. A tier. The stalemate between Izuku and Shigaraki is shaken when Shigaraki steals one of All for One's quirks, Danger Sense, from Izuku. I really liked that losing Danger Sense turned the tides while still leaving Izuku with his attacking quirk that gave him some semblance of a chance. I kind of liked Shigaraki's critiques of Izuku's worldview and his infinite desire to save everyone. The plan created to let go of All for One was risky, and it required a lot of explaining. And then Izuku's physical transformation didn't really make sense, but it's a solid episode. Episode 165. Wrench It Open, Izuku Midoriya. B tier. Izuku's battle with Shigaraki continues as Izuku attempts to forcefully transfer All for One's quirk in order to crack Shigaraki's internal barriers and reach his injured soul. Izuku breaks in and stands in the halls of Shigaraki's past. It was a pretty cool episode thematically, and the use of flashbacks, especially the mixing of memories as the two's quirks combine, was pretty good, but there was a lot of it. Perhaps my favorite moment, something that I really liked, was seeing Eri and Kota rooting for Izuku. Episode 166. From Aizawa. S tier. Izuku, within the mind of Shigaraki, learns of his tragic past, of Tenko Shimura's childhood. Izuku reaches out his hand, and just as Tenko reaches back, All for One bursts forth within Shigaraki's mind and claims total control of his rebellious experiment, one whose entire life he manufactured for this moment. Izuku is ejected from Shigaraki's mind, having lost his arms as he did within. Class 1A and the other heroes, led by Aizawa, are transported by Kurogiri. No, the corpse of his high school friend, Oboro, have arrived. Eraserhead, given Ares' horn, rewinds Izuku and heals his arms. The army of heroes and a fully healed Izuku stand against All for One, now the master of Shigaraki's body. This episode is as great as it is, because as much as I've known All for One manipulated Shigaraki, this is the first time that I saw Shigaraki was manufactured by All for One. That his life was so controlled, even his tragic backstory entirely and precisely crafted, that it really felt like he didn't have a choice in his own life. It made me reconsider my attitude thus far that he had a tragic upbringing and it could have maybe turned out better if he didn't fall into All for One's hand, but ultimately that he was an agent in his own life, turning out so poorly, changed from that to me questioning everything. If everything to this extent was manufactured to turn him into this, did he really have a choice? It's also the first villain that I've truly felt that way about. And though I question how applicable it is to reality, where there isn't an almost all-powerful monster like All for One, it did a really great job at shattering my perspective. I also think this episode was great payoffs to two of the Chekhov's guns, Kurogiri and Eri. I leave this episode excited for what comes next. Episode 167, Izuku Midoriya Rising, B tier. Bruised and battered heroes step out of Kurogiri's portals and stand beside Izuku against All for One's return in Shigaraki's body. There's a lot of narrating and characters talking about how Izuku inspired them. I also thought that the line that you're no demon lord, you're nothing but a lonely man was a genuinely fair critique of the man inside of All for One, but also he's strong enough that he is kind of a demon lord. Episode 168, Epilogue, the hellish Todoroki family final, C tier. As society rebuilds, loose ends are tied. The Todoroki family visits the burnt crisp of Dabi as he draws ever nearer to death. Bakugo's body being so destroyed made sense, and I liked the parallels to Izuku in earlier seasons. I liked watching Bakugo be distressed upon learning that Izuku no longer held All for One, and that Bakugo won't be able to keep competing with him. The graduation was kind of weird, but fine. Aoyama leaving UA makes sense, and I like Hawks becoming the new Safety Commission president. The conclusion to the Todoroki family arc was good. There's just not a lot to say about it. Episode 169, The Girl Who Loves Smiles, D tier. As remaining loose ends are tied and redevelopment continues, the class begins their second year. Ochako's inner battle is revealed, her great guilt of being unable to save Toga. I don't empathize with Ochako's empathy. While I can logically in some ways justify her feelings, this episode rides or dies on whether you can empathize with what I can only describe as a combination of toxic empathy, the part I have a problem with, and PTSD arising from the battle and Toga's death. Episode 170, My Hero Academia, B tier. The show concludes showing us the world, greatly changed 8 years after the final conflict. The students are full-blown heroes, and Izuku is a teacher at UA, and the society at large is more empathetic, looking out for those in need. Izuku receives a gift from his class, a suit, much like the one All Might used in his fight against All for One. I didn't really like the suit because it changes what was a tragic sacrifice into nothing more than an inconvenience. My other critique is that I feel like the show is way too hard on the grandma. I don't feel like she did anything wrong by reaching out originally to Shigaraki, but changing her mind when she saw a child with a psychotic killer's grin. But it was also interesting development within her. I really liked Izuku becoming a teacher. It made a lot of sense. I just wish this episode hadn't undermined the feeling of sacrifice with the gift of a superpowered suit. And the conclusion leaves me with a few questions, which I'll get to in just a moment. It stuck the landing for me. It was a shaky landing, but one that passes. There was too much that was glossed over, like how are Bakugo's explosions rainbow now? How did the early wielders of One for All gain and pass the power? And leaves a few questions at the end as to, well, the quark singularity theory. That quarks will develop and destroy the world. Is it true? It was just emphasized so much to explain random quirk growth, and there doesn't actually seem to be an answer to it, which there should be, given how much it was emphasized. Similarly, Did Ochako and Izuku ever go on a date? Why was her crush emphasized so much if you're not going to show anything about it at the end? But it also has the best episode, the one that really got me to take a step back and question my own worldview, as similar as it is today as to what it was before. It uses so many of the cards it laid on the table so perfectly, and it showed a lot of growth. I really love this show. It's maybe the only show I'm passionate enough to do such a giant project on. I love Izuku's growth and innate heroism. I love the Todoroki family story. I love seeing the conflicting worldviews on protection, heroism, and society clash. I liked seeing the students develop over the 8 seasons. And I also have a lot of critiques. The show too often, though not really with Izuku, treats hard and fast quirk rules as changeable. Toga gaining quirk use, not just physical transformation. Uraraka suddenly being able to lift things that touch the things she's touched. Bakugo being able to launch sweat particles with his exploding sweat particles, and more. Each one of these developments needed to be set up better and explained in the hard and fast rules of quirks. I also think the creator a little bit too much treats a tragic past as justification for evil. I certainly think that each of the villains did face a tragic past, and I wish it could have happened differently. But sometimes the problem was within the character, and not the fault of society at large. Shigaraki finding great pleasure in destroying things, and, admittedly, yes, being manipulated by All for One, but not the fault of the old lady who reached out to help, but withdrew her hand upon seeing the psychotic look on his face. Toga, who as a young child killed birds and another child to suck their blood, because it was her way of showing love, and not just the parents who, presumably after repeatedly trying to get her to change, find her actions disgusting. Or Dabi, who, yes, had his immense desire lit and abandoned by a bad father, but also watched from a distance and didn't see the remorse his father felt, or even see that part of the reason that the others, including his father, stopped him early on, was for his own protection. There is truth that they are shaped by the tragedies, but it doesn't justify their actions. The show also relies far too heavily on flashbacks. Maybe if I watched slower than I do, once a week or once a month, I wouldn't have minded so much, but there are simply too many flashbacks. And, as I mentioned, I feel like there were some questions that needed answers that didn't receive them. The quark singularity theory and Zuko and Ochako's relationship. But, as far as the show is from perfect, it also tells some beautiful stories that cause me to think and inspire me to become a better man.